All right, we're at 11:05. So I think we should go ahead and get started. I'm going to kick it over to Lois, who is going to kick off the meeting.
All right, thank you very much, Erin, and welcome everyone to the DCYF Early Learning Advisory Council meeting. We just want to review the virtual meeting protocols with you and just ask a couple of things. To be sure and mute yourself during the meeting unless you're speaking or asking a question or responding to one. There are Q&A sections devoted throughout the meeting, but you can always feel free to put any questions that you have in the chat box, and the CE team will ensure that the presenter has access to those and that they are acknowledged and responded to. If for any reason you place the call on hold and music begins to play, you'll be disconnected. So you will have to call back in. And we ask for those, if you can, to go through and just put down, if you see I have Lois Martin and then I added member. So if you're on your laptop and you float your cursor over your face, you'll see 3 little dots. You click on those and there's an option to rename. So you can put whether you're a member of the public, you can put your pronouns, but the biggest thing we ask is that you do label yourself as an RA member or a member of the public or DCYF staff. So that's something that you can do now. If you have any technical difficulties, be sure you can use the chat box, or if that's not working, you can email the DCYF community engagement team. So just want to go through that. And then we just want you to share in the chat, because we do have a full agenda and want to have plenty of time, just your name, where you're located, and your role. So in addition to renaming, if you would also put that in the chat as well, and we'll go from there. The other thing too, and I'm going to ask Jessica if you can drop it in the chat box, for those who may not have access to the materials, they are available on the DCYF webpage. I'm sorry, on the DCYF ELAC meetings webpage. Let me be specific about that. So we're going to drop that in the chat so that you can have access to the materials, and that will help as you engage in our conversation today. So that was very short. So we're going to give everybody a few minutes to put your information in the chat. I see Jessica, thank you very much for sharing where the materials are. So for everyone, that's under Jessica Spencer. So we'll give everyone a few minutes to put their information in. And then I'm thinking, Enrica, I'll turn it over to you. I believe I haven't looked to see if Frank is here yet.
I'm not seeing him on here yet. Let's see, we have a few minutes for that, so I'll pay
Well,
him.
maybe if he comes on a little early, we can just go ahead and let him start. And in the meantime, we'll just keep seeing the names as they pop up in the chat. And thank you everyone for being here. We know this is a time commitment. And for many of us, part of our work, but yet still as volunteers. So I thank you very much for lending your time to ELAC. Erin or CE team, is there anything else you want to add?
Well, I was going to mention that what Frank's going to be speaking on today is actually related to the written update that he provided in the feedback loop. So even though we haven't quite gotten to the feedback loop review, I thought it might be helpful to just pull that up so people can. There we go. So if you look at the first, yeah, okay. It's the very first section of the feedback loop. So that gives kind of that gives an overview of what Frank will be speaking on today, in response to some member questions that we received during the last meeting. So members can take a moment to review that in case any questions pop up.
Perfect use of our time. So when Frank comes on, everybody will come back at 11:15. But in the meantime, would encourage everyone to take a look at that document so we're ready for a robust discussion.
For those of you that may have just dialed in, we will be starting the next presentation in about 3 minutes. Hey, Frank,
Aaron,
you are right on time. All right.
try to be. I don't want Enrica angry at me.
Oh, yeah.
I don't need.
No, that would never happen, Frank.
It is so good to see you.
Yeah, I'm so glad.
Sorry, it's not in person.
Yes, do definitely miss the in-person meetings. Totally agree. Yeah.
So how have the last 3 years been?
It's quite a journey. Quite a journey. So I think it looks like we should probably get get started since Frank is here, and really excited, Frank, that you're here. But I know a few other folks have just arrived to the meeting. So DCYF's Chief of Staff, Frank Ordway, is here to provide us with an overview of the operational plan forward for the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice. So I know most of us have spent the last few couple of minutes just reviewing the written update, Frank, that you provided. But it's great that you're here to sort of turn that written update to life, as well as I suspect that there might be some questions that that folks have here. And just a reminder to everyone that as Frank is presenting, please type your questions or comments into the chat box. And after the sort of formal presentation is over, definitely take time to address all those questions that are typed, as well as open it up for additional questions for Frank. So with that, I will turn it over to Frank.
Thank you, Rika. It's just so great to be here. It's great to see you, to see Lois, to see some of the other names here. It's been too long. Back at the beginning of the pandemic, my role in the agency changed, and I ended up, I know a lot about leases and lawsuits and HR systems now. So my world is a little different than it was the last time we got to see each other, but I always just deeply appreciated these meetings and our opportunity to actually see each other in person and break bread together and wrestle with the issues of the day. So it's great to be here. It's great to see you. And I wish we were in person. So those of you who are huggers, that I could hug and say hello. But it's great to see you, and I'm looking forward to the conversation today. I am the Chief of Staff here at the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, and one of the first things I did when I got the distinct pleasure of this job was to actually form the Office of Race, Equity, and Social Justice in our agency. It was a core part of the reason that our agency was created, was to take these issues on as best we could, and we had no formal group internally that really led that as our agency was created. We did have people who were leading from where they sat, though, and the Day Shogren, Yvette Jasper, Latoya Holmesware were all leaders within this agency from where they sat on those issues. And so when I became Chief of Staff, and again, one of the very first decisions I made was to create this office, it was a pretty easy choice to put the three of them in those roles and to give them a chance to create it, to give them a chance to lead inside the agency. As you all know, there's no playbook for this kind of work, and it's incredibly hard. It's hard on the individuals that do it. And we run systems that are riven with institutional and systemic racism. And you know, Nigel, I see you in one of the boxes there. Your words from a long time ago ring in my ears on a daily basis, which was that our systems were used as a weapon against the Native American communities in this state. And the responsibility for undoing that is something that every member of this agency and staff member of this agency share. And the members of the Office of Race, Equity, and Social Justice get to live every single day. So they were in place. We built a lot when they were here. Affinity groups based on both ethnicity and other issues that are commonplace across the agency now. We have a number of different teams that are formed to take on certain issues and to help build capacity internally in the agency. We also have a new office at the governor's office, the Office of Equity, which is led by Dr. Johnson, Dr. J as she calls herself. But as a chief of staff, I get a lot of pressure from the governor's office about lots of different things. This one feels the most authentic and complete of any of the offices or any of those directives that we get from the governor's office. The reinforcement and the expectation of what our agency and all agencies are supposed to do is reinforced whether the Office of Equity is in the room or not. And I think that that shows me a seriousness and a commitment from the governor's office around these issues that is more than a checkbox. That didn't exist when our office was created. And so it's a relatively new office in the governor's team, and we'll see how they do in the budget and what kind of resources they are able to bring. But it's a really significant asset for our agency, for our Office of Race, Equity, and Social Justice, and I think a place for all of you who are activists or influencers of things, making sure that you've got that office on your list of people to meet with and to talk with, because they are impacting the way agencies operate. And I think it's a pretty good line for all of you who are interested in this arena to influence what's going on, is to make sure that that office is in your orbit and that you're connecting with them in addition with us directly. At the beginning of the summer, the team that founded the office, my original trio, informed me that they were all going to be looking for other work as they sought to spread their wings and move along. And we've got folks who have moved on to lead this work for King County, to join national consulting firms leading this work, as well as joining the University of Washington. So the team all landed in really important arenas and areas of influence where we still partner with them. And we've begun the process of replacement. We've now got 4 new staff members in the Office of Race, Equity, and Social Justice. We will soon have 6 or 7. At that point, it will be the largest office of its kind of any executive branch agency. And it will be the first one with a seat at the executive leadership table as well. And so it's a good evolution. We're still working out some of the details. The team met with the leadership team just yesterday. We spent a couple hours just getting to know each other. The ResJ team had to go through some speed dating as members of the leadership team were moving around the room. So they were a little tired at the end of it, but it gave them a chance to actually meet with all of us and get to know us a little bit. They all joined not all of them joined the agency. They all started these positions in the fall and winter of 2022. And so right before the holidays, and there wasn't a lot of time for intersection then. And so we finally got it taken care of this week, where we actually all got together in person. I've been meeting with the team for a couple of weeks now. A lot of them live in Tacoma, so I've been going to Tacoma. In addition to meeting in person, we've been meeting with a lot of community organizations. And the reason we're doing that is both to ground them in the work, but also part of the requirement that we have as an agency, and part of the requirement that the Office of Equity is establishing, is the requirement of co-design for a lot of our work. And so if we're designing a new policy, if we're designing a budget ask, if we are developing a new program of services of some kind, the requirement that we actually work with those communities in the development, there's sort of a checkbox for it now. They're working on making that a lot more robust. And it is a real positive, and it's an area where, for an agency like ours, we were already trying to live into that, not always successfully, but trying. There's going to be a lot more guidance and support across the enterprise for us in that, the fact that other agencies will be doing it too. But I think it's one of those areas where bodies like this can really increase and amplify your voice. Is, every thing that we submit, every additional investment, every change in policy, every agency request legislation where we might be looking to either develop or increase the availability of a given service, the Office of Financial Management, as they go through the approval process, wants to see, who did we talk to? Documentation of the time, documentation of the influence, documentation of the shifts that we went under based on those conversations. So they're doing their best to make it an authentic, real requirement, not one where we just hold a meeting and I say, yeah, of course, I talked to Lois and Enrique, we got it good. Like, it has to actually be an authentic process. And that's a positive. And I think that's also one where you all, as we go forward, can help hold us accountable at this table, is to make sure that the stuff in the early learning realm is coming through you, not just to be reviewed and whatnot, but a real conversation about where is that money going? What is the decision? And that you all have a little bit more of a voice there. It's a really positive requirement. It's also one that state government is going to be terrible at. And so the funding for it is small. The requirements are high. We're not letting the funding requirements be a barrier for our agency's commitment to this, but these advisory groups are going to be key elements in that process. They will not be the sole element, however. And so our requirements are pretty significant in terms of, not only are we required to work with groups like yours, but we're really supposed to stretch our muscles a little bit in terms of our direct connection with consumers, with families, with providers. And so your help in connecting to them will be super helpful to all of us. But also, I think you all need to be prepared to recognize that this is not the sole table that we will rely on for those conversations. And so they're asking us to be as broad in our engagement as we can be. And this is one of those arenas where we get a chance to really stretch our wings a little bit. Some good news. We made a lot of changes based on our commitment in this space, whether it was around reform of background checks, the changes in the way in which we pursue childcare support, way in which we're doing some of our hiring practices, and also how we are focusing in our child welfare arena on placements. We're starting to see the results of that work, and it's incredibly encouraging. We're seeing reductions in disproportionality. We're seeing reductions in the number of kids removed. We're seeing increases in families being the place where the kids that are at risk are being placed with kin. They're being placed with whether they're actual or fictive kin, depending on the community. And the results, the positive results of that are generational. And so it's very encouraging to see that some of our talk is actually turning into data, which means that things are changing on the ground out there. We've got a long way to go, of course, but after a couple of years of concerted effort, I'm glad that we're actually seeing results that are meaningful and measurable, in particular when it comes to disproportionality across our system. This is a core commitment of this agency in terms of both who we are, but why we were created. As I mentioned, our systems are riven. Child welfare, juvenile justice are both systems that have long histories of disproportionality, long histories of destruction of communities and families, oftentimes based on race. So our responsibility is to not only stop doing those wrong things, but actively do the right is a massive shift for an agency of our size with the number of employees we have. But that's what we are endeavoring to do. And that's what the Office of Race, Equity, and Social Justice gets to be a significant component of for our agency. In this arena, in early learning, the exploitation has been on the worker. We rely on low income, often women of color, to do the most important work in the lives, in the time period of a child's life. And we should pay them commensurate with that importance and that impact. And we're not there yet. And so I think that's one of the areas where both this table and our agency can do more, is on that advocacy, not just around a living wage. This should be one of those jobs that people really want, not just because they want to work with kids, but because people are compensated for the importance and the impact of the work. And there is no more important time in a child's life than those first 4 or 5 years. And the people that are educating them and caring for them during that time should be paid appropriately. And they're not yet. And so I think that's an area where I could point to some areas where we're making real progress. And I know we've gotten rate increases and we've gotten some increases here, but we also all know that our childcare workers were underwater before those increases. And now we've gotten them, and there's lots of, I don't know if anybody's noticed, but everything's more expensive now. And so I worry about, or assume that most of the increases that we've got have been vaporized by those increased costs of doing business and increased costs of just being in our society. So we've still got a lot of work to do around compensation in this space. And I think it's one of the areas where we have the most to do, honestly. And so look forward to your guidance and counsel there, but that's an area where we have to do just continual pressure on all of the funding streams we have, as well as on the system at large, because you all know that we have a lot of providers that aren't involved in any of the money that we have, and trying to craft a solution that's equitable and effective, taking in that diversity, is really hard, but we have to keep pushing ourselves, folks, and pushing for these solutions, because we're only going to be as good as our workforce, and they need and deserve to be paid more than they are today. And it's both an equity question, but also just an availability question. Great question, Enrique. They are all engaged, in all of the current ARESJ team that have been meeting with the former members to talk about what worked, what didn't work, gaining guidance and expertise from them, also connections. We before this call, I was on one of our really significant nonprofit partners is the Casey Family Programs here in Washington State, and they do a lot of work both in support of specifically the child welfare system, but also just for municipalities around data and these issues in general. And we were connecting our current team to the Casey team today, and that was one of those batons that was handed off with a great deal of assistance from the former teammates here. And so we are doing our best to both let them do their new jobs, but also to ping them when the new team needs their wisdom and their guidance. And they've been really, really gracious with their time with our team. And there was a fair amount of crossover, in particular with Latoya Holmes, where at the end, just because she was one of the last folks, but she helped me with the hiring process for this group. And so there were a couple of months when she was still here where there was a lot of pretty intense handoffs going on. I see your hand, Lois.
Hi, thanks, Frank. I just want you to scroll up a little bit. I did have a question before Enriquez.
Yep.
And it might be, it's just as easy for you to read it, but I can clarify if you have any questions.
We did do exit interviews. It's a common exercise. I'm not going to share specific HR data because it's not fair. It's a private conversation between the employee and the employer. But there are things about this work that are just really hard when you're carrying it every day. And so thinking about how we do a better job of providing some respite and resilience, there were some areas where the team was under-resourced, administrative support and those kinds of things, where they were having to do a lot of their own scheduling and calendar juggling and stuff that was just tiring. You know, we were hiring them for other kinds of expertise. And so one of the things that, you know, as I mentioned, the team has grown, and not just in bodies, but in specific roles that help support the team. And so the administrative function, as well as some program and contract and IT functions, so they're not having to be as self-reliant as they were, is part of our reaction, is to make sure that they've got more support to do the hard interpersonal work and training work that they're asked to do. That was a big part of it. We're not funded directly to do any of this. And so our ability to carve out and grab budget from different places is kind of seasonal. And so as this one came around, we're going from 3 people to 7. And then there's going to be a couple of parts of the agency that are going to pay to play as well, if you will, where they're going to fund specific positions with this group to help their division with the effort. Licensing is one, child welfare is one, JR is one. So they're all going to be self-funding some positions. So the team will ultimately be 10 or 11. And part of the plan for that was what we heard from them, Lois, just for 3 people to have all of this work on their plate was just, we knew it was too much to ask, but in the exit interviews, it became pretty clear that it wasn't even appropriate to ask. And so we did our best to try to bring in some additional resources for them.
Okay, thank you. Because yes, I understand you can't share directly who said what, which
I'm
is
also
why it
thrilled
asked
for
what.
all 3 of them. I mean, the part of our recruitment was the fact that they all went to such great places, and that these offices offer you an opportunity to grow and to go. And so some folks made decisions on higher pay closer to home. People made decisions, you know, state government is a stifling environment to work in, honestly. And they wanted to be able to be somewhere where they were a little bit more free, if you will. So there was a lot of things that went into it. Working for me is a drag. So, you know.
Okay, so basically it sounds like, in summary, the top 3, one of the main reasons just the lack of internal support.
It was a big one.
That's why I just asked for just a summary as opposed to, you know, detail, you know, this person
and I would
said that.
say,
Of course, I realize that's not appropriate, but yeah, just so
that
lack of support, the IT piece. And it sounds like you're putting things in place now to try to remove some of those challenges that the former team had.
And I think, Lois, there was also, I mean, internally with the pandemic, and, you know, I think it's important to note, I don't want to use it as too much of an excuse, but we're still kind of in our infancy as an agency. We were fully and wholly constituted in, you know, the summer of 2019, and 6 months later, we were all sent home. And I think that I referenced the sort of lack of IT support and other things. I think that our leadership team was freshly constituted in the middle of the pandemic, as was this office. I think that there were some things that we could have done better with the intersection between the leadership team and the Office of Race, Equity, and Social Justice. And so in addition to the frustration around like actual support, like admin and IT and those kinds of things, I think there was some frustration about, is the leadership of the agency really with us or not? Now, I know where my leadership is and their commitment here, but the intersection with this team wasn't as strong as it needed to be. And I think that added to frustration, which is also part of the reason that we broke bread together yesterday was because the ResJ team never once met with our leadership team in person. And so I think that that contributes to distance and allows ground for miscommunication to grow when you don't have those personal relationships. And so part of the learning that I took from it as well with this new crew is to get them intimate and in with the leadership is with more intention than was taken last time. It was a lesson.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'm just going to close with this. One of the things that I did appreciate seeing in the feedback loop is that now this is going to be a cabinet level position, which I know is advice that ELAC has been giving for since the ResJ group was pulled together. So it's good to see that advice from ELAC is being followed through with the new group.
Yeah, I'm excited. And we'll be the first agency that has them there. Everybody who's really committing to this work, how you resource it, how you structure it, there isn't a playbook. And ultimately, it's about each of our staff members, each of our assistant secretaries, each of our admin. I mean, all of our staff at all positions have to live into this. We need an office like this to lead, to cajole, to support, but they're not our race equity Sherpas leading, carrying our entire load. We have to support our staff's individual journey as well. And I think that'll help that this team's, the ground in which they get to run is having that be more consistent. Now, one of the things that we've also been asked to do a lot of, and it's an understandable request, is more training. One of the things that we're looking into right now is, one, we're an agency that requires a lot of training. Every state employee gets to take a lot of training. I mean, you take trainings on contracts, you take training on discrimination, you take training on defensive driving, you take training on contracts. There's a whole load of things just as a state employee that you get the pleasure of being, basically all the big mistakes that state employees make turn into a training that we get to take to not do that thing again. Now, compliance training is one thing. Getting people to actually change behavior, decision-making, and approach, and the spiritual nature of that, I don't know that it results from a compliance training. We are looking at the total training load in the agency. The Office of Equity, as I mentioned before, that governor's level office has a new training, and the directive about it just came out last week. Every state employee will be required to take it. And so we have a baseline enterprise level training that is a total of 8.5 hours that every state employee will be required to take. Now, that training alone is not sufficient. And so one of the things that we're talking about is, what do we fill in the gaps with? How do we amplify the training that is required? And is it more training, or is it more other kinds of engagement, support, and conversation that help change those hearts and minds? That's something we're diving into right now. We met with the training leaders yesterday, the leadership team and the ResJ office, about the currently required, recently revised statewide training. And so we're looking into it. The leadership team will be taking that training as a group, so we can think about how we can best amplify and support the conversation in the agency after people are required to take it. So we don't want this to be a compliance exercise. We don't want people to turn it on their Zoom and walk around their office and hit the next button until it's done. We want to support this as more of an actual personal commitment to the agency and journey. And we also want to have that stuff reflected in the way we hire people, so people know who they're coming to work with and what to expect when they come. That's a big deal for us too. Cheryl, it is so good to see you. Wish we were in person. And what can I?
There's that hug. Hugs. Frank, I really want to commend you for just the whole last 5 minutes about talking about we realize that the training is not going to change behaviors, because it doesn't. It really does have to be that personal commitment to the work that you guys are all doing. And I really appreciate that. And I also appreciate the comment to Nigel, because the whole idea of sovereignty and what that means, and remembering that conversation as we're talking about race and equity, because a lot of times we forget that our tribes are the first people of this land, and we never want to forget that, and how that reflects on the work that we do with tribes. And I appreciate, we have the Centennial Accord and all of that, but when you're talking about the commitment of individuals working within the department, that is key to everything. And as a person who at, what was I, probably 18 or 19 years old with a baby and trying to get services, and went in for the first meeting, this was a minute ago, but trying to get services, but going for one meeting and never going back and never getting services. I know that still happens today. People try to get services and they don't, because of the way that they were treated. So I'm just really grateful for the work and the conversation, and excited to see change in that arena as far as how we respect people and have knowledge about the experiences that people have. So thank you. Lifting up my hands to you today.
Thank you, Cheryl. I can't tell you what that means to me. It's the most important work any of us will be involved in. And I know that you and your community think in generations. And I just hope that I'm part of a generation that's taken the step in the right one. And so when you look back, that maybe 6 or 7 down the road, we've got this solved, and they'll be able to look back and know when it got started. And started with you all. The work with the tribes is something that our secretary just takes so personally and seriously. Both our role in the undoing, our responsibility in supporting current, but also the extension of sovereignty in all of its guises. And one of our new ARESJ members talks about, she says she's got 5 or 6 years left of public work before she retires. And she wants to get as much work done during that time as she can, because we've got support, we've got direction. We have a governor asking us to it, a legislature, courts. This is about the hearts and minds of our staff at this point. It really is. And the systems that we rely on. I'm hopeful that we can paddle as far as we can together while we've got this support. And I think that there's some work we can do to protect and extend sovereignty. The state has already doubled down on ICWA. We're closely watching, of course, what's going on at the Supreme Court right now in that arena. And having a coordinated and consistent response to whatever their ruling is something that I know this governor, but in particular Secretary Hunter, is very dedicated to. So more to come there. And I think that, we have to figure out whatever that replacement for training is, because it helps, but it isn't a solution. And so thinking about how we'd love to get your advice and guidance as we go forward, is how do we support our staff and our organization's conversation in addition to the training? And I'll send you all the link to the videos that we're required to watch, so you can get a sense of what this training is going to be about. And then you can help both identify where we've got holes and gaps, and maybe give us some advice on how to amplify. But it is about that personal connection, that personal experience, that personal responsibility, and really committing to a different view of child safety and what that means compared to where we may have been 5 to 10 years ago. We've got to think about it very differently. And we're just starting to see now, again, the evidence of reduction in the number of kids being removed, and more appropriate family community placements taking place than were taking place a few years ago. So the efforts we're putting forward are working, and let's work to accelerate them as best we can. So I know you've got other agenda items here. I know how serious ELAC is about staying on time, so I will not say hi to everybody else like Nancy and others on the screen that I would love to be having a chance to say hello to. And I'll step out, but I just really appreciate it. And I think we should come back, and we should come back with the newly constituted office to meet with all of you and to make sure that that relationship is established as quickly as possible. One of the new members has got a deep connection with the early learning world, both as a father, as a consumer, and as a staff member here, Ray Soriano. But some of the other group, some of this early learning stuff is going to be a little new for them. So it'll be good education to get that team here, Aaron. So we should talk about how we construct that agenda. Thank you all. It's great to see the names and the faces of so many that I haven't had a chance to talk to in too long. I wish we had more time, but I'll let you get back to your agenda. Thank you so much for the time.
And Frank, before you step away, just a thank you for taking the time to meet with all of us this morning. It's one thing to receive written updates, but being able to hear from you, to hear more about what is happening, DCYF, giving space to field questions. That's so important. This work is just too important. So just want to extend a note of thanks, as well as definitely, I think, speaking on behalf of the group, I think it will be very important to have you come back, and so that we can meet the full team.
That would be, look forward to it very much. Thank you all.
And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lois.
So want to give people a few minutes to look thank you, Jessica. We did have a chance, part of the feedback loop included what Frank shared. Going to give everybody maybe, 5 or 6 minutes or so, since we have a little bit of time, if you haven't had a chance to take a look at the meeting minutes, as well as the agency regional coalition updates. We'll give you a few minutes to do that, and we'll come back together and go through a vote and address any questions at 11:51. I know it's not much time, but hopefully it'll be a refresher for most of the ELAC members and RAs, and give community members a chance to look at those documents. So give everybody a few minutes, and I'll pull us back together and we'll go through them. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much. So for ELAC members, RAs, let's go through, take a look. I hope everyone had a chance to take a look at the December meeting minutes to see if there's anything that needs to be added to them that might have been left out, as well as if you were present and you weren't accounted for, if you would take a look at that too. But if there aren't any questions, then we'll move it for a vote. Any updates or questions? All right, so we just need to accept the minutes as written in. So we just need a motion from a member and a second, and then we'll just do thumbs up, thumbs sideways, thumbs down.
I motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Colleen. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, thanks so much, Debbie. All right, so we have a first and a motion and a second. Let's just move for the vote. All in favor signify by either raising. This means yes, I can live with it, or no. You can either use your button, or else you can just hold your thumb up, whichever's easiest for you for voting members. CE team, just let me know when you're ready to move on.
I think we got it.
All right, thank you very much. All right, guys, so let's take a look at our state agency partner and regional coalition updates. Does any of our coalition partners have anything you want to add to your report, or something that exciting that you're working on that you thought about it after you had sent in your report that you want to share out with the group? All right, well, let's go on to the state agency and partner updates. Any questions about that?
So
There's
I
information.
actually do have a question about that. As I am looking at this report, I am assuming that the state agencies that should be on this report are the ones that are representatives that are listed in the Fair Start for Kids Act, correct? The agencies that are supposed to have a member at ELAC, is that correct? That they should also be giving reports? Okay, so I am noticing that the State Board for Community and Technical Colleges do not ever have a report here. I'm also noticing that Kathy Gable is on the list of members and she is no longer at the State Board. So I'm wondering about communication with the State Board. And I also know I also personally know there are things going on with new liaisons being chosen and stuff, but just want to put that in that I think that's an important member of this board, and I am pushing from my side to get that membership here, but just want to say that out loud, I guess.
Thanks, Nancy. I can provide like a teeny tiny little update on that. That's not much of one, because it sounds, I'm in the same boat as you. Technically, they are on the list of agencies to be providing updates for. And I think you might remember we left them on the dock for like 2 years without them ever submitting anything. So we do not, we have not been provided the updated information, but we finally did reach somebody that was willing to connect with us. And so she's connecting with Chelsea Thompson. She used to be a CE specialist on the team, but now she's the CE operations manager, and which is a newly created position on the team. And she's managing all membership. It's really great to have like an FTE that's able to really focus on that stuff. So she's been really doing a lot she's going to be like doing a lot of work to connect with not only the appointing authorities, but the partner agencies as well, to like actually get the ball rolling. So I'm really hopeful, because we have received like some some informal communication here and there that has kind of been all over the place, but we have not been able to get them to assign anybody yet. But I do know that we are now connected with them. That's the most. I
Okay,
don't have
so-
more details than that, but it is something that we're actively working on.
Okay, so if she needs some support, let me know. And
Mhm.
also the Early Childhood Teacher Preparation Council is pushing pretty hard for this to happen as well, because I keep telling them that Kathy was a great champion when she was here, and that is not there anymore. So anyway, I think it's an important organization, our state agency, to be a part of this. As we move forward with training and all of those things, they need to be sitting at the table.
All right, Nancy, I'll make sure that Chelsea knows you're a resource for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much, Erin, and thank you for bringing that up, Nancy. It's so important. And that also goes to my question, maybe something we can talk about in our executive committee, but just looking at the report, Ryan, is Ryan here today? I'm sorry, I can't see everyone on the screen. Oh, there she is. Okay. Maybe it's something we can talk about a little bit more detail about the technical report around integrated and inclusive programs for pre-K age children. I know that that is an issue that is near and dear to a number of our ELAC members' hearts and their work. So, you know, Ryan, I know we don't have much time, but maybe that's something that you could share a little bit more about that work at a future ELAC meeting. Is that something you might be willing to do?
Yes, absolutely. And we have brought that forward to ELAC in the past. I think it's just been under a different guise, because this is the second iteration of the joint agency report that DCY. But I agree, Lois. I think it's a really great opportunity to bring us back, because we're done. We've made recommendations. We're in the middle of ledge session, so it gives us a chance to see where we can lean in and advocate together. So I absolutely think it's a great place to go.
Okay, thank you. So we went from having extra time to kind of moving into 12 o'clock space. So I just want to ask real quick if anyone has on anything, any other comments, which I know the biggest thing, Frank, anything else anyone had questions about?
Lois, I had my hand up for the agency updates. I just had a quick update from Department of Veterans Affairs. May I give that now?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I'm sorry. I actually missed Eric's deadline for submitting the agency and partner updates, so I apologize. But Washington State Department of Veterans Affairs has released our child care report for military families in the state of Washington. And with your permission, I can put the link to that report in the chat. And then would that be okay?
Please.
And the Department of Defense has expanded its fee subsidy program called Military Child Care in Your Neighborhood Plus. They expanded a year ago today, actually, and we're continuing to struggle to recruit providers to that subsidy program. So can also put that information in the chat. And then finally, the National Guard is piloting a subsidy program called Weekend Drill Childcare for Washington State. I think there's just a few states that are being piloted for that program, and again, recruiting providers to participate in that weekend provider program. They're different set of requirements, so it's important that providers look at eligibility for each separately. And that's it. Thank you for the opportunity to post late.
I just wanted to, hi, this is Cheryl. Just wanted to mention to Ryan again about the, I feel like unfunded mandate as far as inclusion is concerned. and how that's being addressed, because we just this year at Betty J. Taylor Early Learning Academy, in the past, we have never been able to fill all of our slots for special education for our Birth to 3 program. And I know that we're talking about preschool, but we couldn't fill our 7 slots. And right now we have almost 17 children in Birth to 3 that need special services. And on our preschool wing, we used to have like 3 to 4 out of our 9 classrooms that needed special services. Right now, we're about at 27, and some of them are speech language, but there's a lot of them that need additional support. And so I know that that's a national issue right now after coming out of COVID and the needs that children have. So I'm hoping that we're kind of spending some time with that as the work is going on for integrated and inclusive classrooms.
This is Ryan. It's the way that you're presenting this, Cheryl, is interesting to me because unfunded mandate for inclusion. I'm curious at a different time potentially, because I know I'm not sure what our time span is, but I would be curious to connect with you offline and dig into that deeper, and then how it's impacting you. And then agreed, there is obviously some national connections to some of what we're doing, and I'm curious what might be specific to our tribal programs, because there is funding differences for our tribes as opposed to our state and federal programs. Yeah, I'm super curious. You've piqued my interest. And and just how that's described. Inclusion is a word, it is an action. Special education is an obligation. And I think there's some interesting nuances there that I would love to unpack with you.
And thank you, Ryan. And it might be a good idea if Nigel invites you to one of our tribal meetings so that we can talk about it with you.
I would 100% love that.
Thank you.
And now that we're back to in person too, Nigel has, I have not had the opportunity to also visit your beautiful center. And, I think there's some, yes, I'm willing to travel and I would love to be a part of that conversation.
All right, so I see Nigel has asked you to send him your email address, Ryan. And I know Cheryl will reach out and connect, but this that just shows how important it will be to have you, share a little bit more at ELAC about the work and how you're going to support communities to meet this mandate in a way that's going to be supportive of providers and families and especially our children. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Enrica.
Hey, Lois, it looks like Val has her hand raised.
Oh, Val, I'm sorry. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Where did Val go?
Hi, this is Val. Hi, everyone.
Oh.
I just wanted to offer, I work with the Early Support for Infants and Toddlers program at the ESID State Leadership Office. And I heard Cheryl sharing some information about needs for children ages 0 to 3 as well. Need special services, and I would love to offer to be a part of the conversation with Ryan and Cheryl and others to help think about how to make sure that children ages 0 to 3 with special needs are getting the services that they need, and how we might be able to support that.
So this might be a conversation where we can involve, those ELAC members who want to participate. So something we can talk about in our executive meetings, as well as whatever conversation you guys have in between. So just something definitely that's on our radar. So thank you, Val, for volunteering as well. And I know, Eric, I see you busy typing, so if you can just note all this, got it, thank you, and then we'll make it happen. So thank you guys very much. And thank you for being so involved in the topics that are included in our various feedback loops and reports, because that's where we can affect change, is by sharing these type of challenges. So thank you. All right, Enrica.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lois. So I'm here to introduce, and you can sort of see the slide up there, but Colleen Condon, who's an ELAC member, as well as the Inland Northwest Early Learning Alliance Regional Co-Lead, State Policy and Advocacy and Childcare Voice Co-Lead, along with Rachel Hall, State Director with Washington Communities for Children, as well as Washington Communities for Children Network leaders. They're all here with us today to provide us with an overview of Washington Communities for Children, an update on work that they're engaging in, as well as take some time for some Q&A. We recognize that we are slightly, we're running a little late. However, I want to reassure the team that's come here to present on Washington Communities for Children that you do have the 30 minutes to present. We want to make sure that you have the time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Enrica. We're really excited to be here with you all today. And I am joined by lots of my Washington Communities for Children Network colleagues. So thank you all for being here, especially during lunch hour, which I know is a tough time. So we're here. We're Washington Communities for Children. We are an early childhood network. So we're a network of coalitions, organizations, and individuals who have come together around a shared goal, improving child and family well-being. Here on the map is this is how the state is broken up into 10 different regions across Washington that make up our network. And I realized I just barreled ahead. I think I was feeling the time pressure as we were a few minutes late, and so charged ahead without introducing myself. My name is Rachel Hall, and as Enrica shared at the start, I'm the state director with the Washington Communities for Children. And my role is really to support the 10 regional coalitions. And as you'll learn more about in just a few minutes, we have 7 statewide learning networks. And my role is to support all of those bodies in working together collaboratively. So next slide, please. So I mentioned 7 learning networks. So how we are organized is around these 7 learning networks. And the goal is for each network to meet regularly to build relationships, learn together, identify challenges, and test ideas. So we have this framework or infrastructure at the statewide level, and then we also have this framework matched at the regional and even in some cases local or county level. Let's see, next slide. We have a short video that is aimed at illustrating our network infrastructure. Let's see, Enrica, are you able to play that? If not, I can try from my screen.
I don't have it. It'll take me a second to grab it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, Jessica's getting that popped up. Oh, there we go.
Washington Communities for Children, or WCFC, is a network of coalitions dedicated to connecting local and statewide efforts to improve the well-being of children, families, and communities. Washington Communities for Children is made up of 10 regions, each serving their respective counties. Relationships are the lifeblood of our work, and WCFC is proud to have trusted relationships with over 700 organizations and individuals, including early learning providers, social service agencies, early intervention services, child welfare organizations, libraries, juvenile courts, school districts, public health agencies, higher education, families, and many others. WCFC is an essential piece of the early childhood system in Washington. To ensure policies and programs are responsive to the actual needs of families and communities across the state, WCFC brings together critical community resources, regional expertise, and robust cross-sector relationships to improve systems and achieve measurable results. WCFC's collaborative efforts are organized around 7 statewide learning networks: Data, Equity, Family Voice, Health Provider Voice, Policy and Advocacy, Resource Navigation and Access, and the recently added component, Child Care Voice. As learning networks, the purpose of the 7 teams is to foster learning, connections, and collaborations across the state, with particular focus in each of the component areas. For a visual representation of the WCFC network, we have created a network Kumu map, which can be accessed via our website at www.washingtoncfc.org. Hover over the About option at the top and choose WCFC Network Map from the drop-down menu. With your mouse, hover over an icon to isolate that element type and any other elements it might be connected to. For example, these 10 red squares represent the 10 WCFC regions across Washington state. Here we have visions for early learning. If we click on this element, more information will appear on the left. If we zoom in, we can see some of the local county coalitions that make up Visions for Early Learning. These larger green circles represent each of the 7 statewide learning networks. As mentioned, learning network teams meet regularly to build relationships, learn together, identify challenges, and test ideas. This framework is paralleled in all 10 WCFC regions and in many counties to ensure connectivity within and across early childhood systems. Together, these collaborative efforts identify resource gaps for children and build solutions that are informed by the families and communities most in need of support. As the only statewide network of its kind in Washington, WCFC is filling a critical role in working to connect state and local efforts. With an existing infrastructure of organizational and community partners committed to the well-being of children and families, WCFC can mobilize quickly in response to emergent needs, elevate local issues to local and state policymakers, share resources across counties and regions, and ultimately improve efficient use of government resources. This is our chance to rebuild a system that is sustainable. To do so, we must embark on new types of thinking, learn from our failures, and test innovative solutions. Washington Communities for Children is poised and ready to do just that.
Thanks, Jessica, for navigating us. Yeah, well, we just felt like that's a nice video that I think for some folks, when we talk about network infrastructure and things, it's like maybe vaguely makes sense, but we've been working really hard to try and figure out how we can better illustrate the breadth and depth of the network. So I hope you got a little bit of that from the video. Before I hand it off to some of our other colleagues who are on the call, I wanted to just quickly kind of do some pause. And so oftentimes we get questions about like, well, what do you do? What does your work look like? And so I just kind of wanted to acknowledge some of the events, activities, or milestones that Washington Communities for Children experienced last year. So about a year ago, we started shifting to using the name Learning Networks that I think you've probably now heard me say a few times, with the intent really being to create essentially communities of practice or spaces that are really intended to connect and learn within that respective component area. Last winter, we also received a $900,000 budget proviso from our state legislature, which is intended to fund our infrastructure between January and through June of this year. Our work previous or prior to this year has been majority funded by the preschool development grant, which we're super grateful for those funds to really be able to strengthen and make our infrastructure as robust as it is today. In May of last year, we added the Parent Caregiver Connect to our Family Voice. We've really been working on streamlining and strengthening our communications materials. Like the video you just saw was one example of that. In July of last year, we added a Child Care Voice Learning Network to our state infrastructure. In September, we became the Washington State Anchor Partner for Vroom. Also in September, we hosted our first ever early childhood conference called Beyond Connection. And in October, we welcomed our first fellow from the Pathways Washington organization. So we've been really excited to work alongside Pathways. Of course, lots of things that are not on this list, but just kind of a snapshot of what 2022 looked like for us. So looking ahead to 2023, if we can go to the next slide, I'm going to pass it off to Colleen to share with you what we've been working on this year.
Thanks, Rachel. I am Colleen Condon. I am a childcare provider in Spokane, Washington, as well as a learning network lead for 2 of our networks with Washington Communities for Children, and also do work with my local coalition in WELA. This year, we have an ask of our legislature. We are looking to continue the same level of funding that we've had through Preschool Development Grant and then the proviso that we were awarded last year. We are requesting $3.6 million to sustain our infrastructure and make sure that we can continue to do the work that we have been doing across the state. As you can see on the screen there, most of our funding is used to pay people for their time and the positions that they're filling in our network to continue to keep that engagement and really be that conduit of local to state work and back. And then next, I think we're going to have a slide about the regions. Yes, yeah. So as you guys saw on the map at the beginning and also in the video, we have 10 early childhood coalitions across the state. And so we wanted to direct everybody to see that you should be able to see your county level here and which coalition that is with. On our website, there's contact information for each of the coalition leads, as well as the network leads. And we encourage you, if you are interested in the work or wanted to get in touch with anybody, to visit our website and find that contact information and join with your local coalition. And then, so the coalitions is something that has been known and part of ELAC for quite some time. So when you guys hear folks referring to RAs or the regional advisors, those folks are actually members of each of our coalitions, and they are responsible within their coalition for a policy and advocacy role. And then they also participate in ELAC as part of their position. So we know that there's a general familiarity with the coalitions and with those roles. So we did want to highlight the component that I think most folks are a little less familiar with, which is our learning networks. Again, as Rachel described, a community of practice and centered around some different topic areas or focused on different populations of folks. So we do have many of our network leads here today, and I apologize because I can't see each of you on my screen right now. So we're going to go through these next slides. There's a slide for each of the networks. If you are the network lead, please feel free to unmute and share about your network. And if for some reason one of our network leads is not on, Rachel and I will introduce for them. Oh, yeah. So Childcare Voice, that is the network I was going to be presenting on today. So you can see some information about our meetings, but Childcare Voice is a space that we created that is very centric to the folks who are doing the work with children in the classrooms and in the programs. We bring together all of those voices, create space for them to meet and really self-direct the work that they want to see done. That has led to a lot of engagement with our legislative representatives and several different versions of roundtables with legislators, Q&As, whether that was around an urgent topic like background checks or just more of priorities and things going into session. Excitingly enough, this last November, when we had our annual legislative roundtable, we were joined by Representatives Tana Sen and Senator Andy Billig, and one of our members brought forth an issue surrounding communities of interest, or more commonly referred to as HOAs, and there were some really severe impacts coming from HOAs that were finding family home providers who are operating childcare in their within the HOAs in their private homes. And Representative Sen and Senator Billig, very live on our meeting, discussed who was going to take lead on that. And Representative Sen's office created some legislation that has already been voted off of our House floor and is on its way to the Senate. That is House Bill 1199. And we encourage everybody to take a look at it, but is a really, really great example of the work that we do and really trying to make sure that those who are impacted by decisions being made at the statewide level have access to communicate and help direct hopefully new policy and things that will be more beneficial for the industry.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Soleil Boyd, and I am one of several leads for the Data Learning Network. Can you all hear me? Great. And so the Data Learning Network meets monthly to really look at what is going on across our state and identify data sources that help us measure that quantitatively, really to understand how systems are serving young children and families. Over the last year, the Data Learning Network was very productive. We were able to co-design an early learning dashboard. In addition to the early learning dashboards that DCYF has created, we've created some additional dashboards that provide information on child demographics, access to various programs, and the workforce as well. So we created some data dashboards that help us understand these systems. And we also worked collaboratively to create the State of the Children reports. So those are some of the outcomes of the group. But the group is really a good cross-section. And we also interacted a fair amount with some policy work as well over the last year to finish State of the Children reports and other pieces. So it is a data learning network, and it's really often the intersections between data, policy, and that community and family experience that we're unpacking. And please join us if you'd like.
Soleil, I can take the Equity Learning Network because I don't believe that Krista's here. We have in years past hosted a statewide equity learning network with a focus on identifying and implementing frameworks, tools, and strategies to embed equity in the network and our early childhood resource system. This particular learning network, we're taking a little bit of a pause, recognizing that we really need to dig in as a network and figure out what do we mean when we say embed equity into all facets of our work. So know that equity is definitely a priority. It's something that we do want to focus time, resources on. And so we're currently working to identify a consultant to support us in kind of more of this internal exploration work. So yes, we are excited to share our learnings with you along the way. Let's see, next up, Lyndon.
Thanks, Rachel. Hi, everybody. I am Lyndon Obel, and I serve as the Family Voice Learning Network
lead for Washington Communities for Children. We are a statewide group of early childhood and family champions representing diverse backgrounds and experiences. So we have parents and caregivers, early childhood and family service specialists, government agencies, community health professionals, and others engaged in our group. Our conversations and activities are focused on strengthening family engagement in early childhood systems and programming, and improving culturally relevant access to supports and services for families with young kiddos. We engage in a lot of dialogue, hear from folks and partners who are doing innovative work, particularly in the family engagement area, and then share resources when relevant. As I mentioned, a particular focus is exploring how we can strengthen family engagement in early childhood system building and programming efforts. And so as Rachel mentioned, one initiative that came out of the Family Voice Learning Network is our Parent Caregiver Connect, who is a part of the Family Voice Learning Network, but expressed the value and need for a space where it's really on them to have the freedom to share concerns, connect with one another as fellow parents and caregivers. So that group meets virtually in the evenings and really participates in state engagement opportunities when available, works with other learning networks on particular activities, and really is working to increase their level of feedback and engagement in opportunities within the network. So yeah, a couple exciting things that they led. They participated in the conference and led a session there, and then have worked with a couple different work groups and engaged in some listening sessions. So I do want to put a plug for the Parent Caregiver Connect. We have had majority folks in the Pierce and King County areas, but that group is really interested in recruiting a diverse geographic representation. So if you know of any parents and caregivers in your area who would be interested in joining this particular group, please feel free to reach out to me. They meet in the evening, so a different time from this Family Voice Learning Network, but always try to put a plug in when I can for that group. They're doing some exciting work.
Hi, everyone. My name is Taylor Kerrigan, and I am the statewide lead for Health Provider Voice for WCFC. Additionally, I'm the healthcare liaison for the Pierce County Early Childhood Network. So I kind of have a twofer experience with this work, and it's really special. So with the Health Provider Voice Learning Network, just something that's extremely unique about this whole framework in general is that they do value and prioritize health provider voice when it comes to early childhood. You don't see this often, and it's really special that health providers who do spend so much time with families, with children, with caregivers, they get to be a part of this as well. So as a learning network, the group is comprised of liaisons like myself who have working relationships with healthcare providers within their counties or regions, and then also healthcare providers. And healthcare providers is defined as anyone who provides health-related information to families. So it can be advanced practitioners down to community health workers, social workers. We've got, pretty much anyone who provides health related information gets to be involved in this group, says I. So we are currently working on just providing resources that healthcare providers have available to them to utilize or that they can share with the families that they serve, in terms of social determinants of health resources. We also are working together as a group to just figure out how can we get healthcare providers from across the state involved in this work. It's different for every single region, every single county, and we know that this can work everywhere as long as we're there to support each other. So we really lean on each other and learn from each other all across the state. It's really beautiful. So we meet on the fourth Wednesdays from 3 to 4:15 p.m. I welcome anyone to join who is, interested in seeing how Health Provider Voice works. And I do want to say in Pierce County and the action team in Pierce County, we have our ESIT representation because healthcare providers want to know how can they help when it comes to child development screenings and referrals. So if there's anyone who is interested to join the meeting to be that person representing the state, that would be so awesome. So thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brittany Hardikainen, and today I'm going to be representing our Policy and Advocacy Learning Network. I co-lead this group with Colleen, and we also co-lead Childcare Voice together. But just a little bit about this group and how we've sort of evolved over the last 2.5 years. We're now in our official 3rd year in this group. And in the beginning, we were kind of just trying to identify who we are and what is our place in the state. And once we kind of recognized that we have this unique role in ELAC, we realized that we wanted to sort of separate out our duties. So this Policy and Advocacy Learning Network is similar yet slightly different than the rest of our learning networks because we meet 6 times a year instead of 12 times because our actual learning network, the statewide learning network, where all stakeholders are invited to that space, meets during the odd months of the year. It's currently still slated as the 3rd Friday of every odd month from the 10:30 to 12 time, but we are actually in the process of changing that. So it's very likely that by our March meeting, it will be a different day and time, but more information to come on that as we get there. But the things that we really focus on, in our even months, we meet as just the regional advisors. So you can see here, there's a lot of folks from our regional coalitions that are the regional policy and advocacy leads for their respective regions. And so we meet in the even months in the same week as the ELAC meetings to not only debrief, but also to take the information that is shared here in this space and determine how we can be supportive within our regions and around the state with the information that is shared here and be able to disperse that among our regions. In the odd months, when we have our learning network, that's really a space where we have folks from all over who join us, who represent all different sorts of aspects of early learning. So we do have people representing healthcare, home visiting, family connections. We've got a lot of different folks who join us in those meetings who have some sort of stake in early learning in general and are part of wanting to help move policy forward and advocate for children and families. So we try to provide learning opportunities within our group. For example, we've had Jason Austin from Seattle Human Services. They came and shared with us about the work that's being done in King County and how we can replicate that work within the various different regions. So we actually have some folks on here who are continuing that work within their respective counties, just based on information that we've been able to share within our learning network. So we felt that it was important to have those 2 different spaces because we have kind of a parallel goal within this learning network to be able to advocate for the needs of children and families as a whole and also as an organization through Washington Communities for Children. So we are in this group, our first line of business this year was, of course, to do our advocacy week where we were advocating for our fiscal ask, but in future years, we plan to use this space to advocate for all of the different aspects of our organization, all the different learning networks. So whether it's, healthcare, families, resource and navigation, you name it, all of our learning networks. We plan to have a legislative agenda going into each session where we're advocating for the entire organization as a whole. So this is something that we're working towards once we've kind of found our niche and the way that we all work together in this living and breathing organism of Washington Communities for Children. I think we've found our place. So if you are interested in joining this group, you are absolutely welcome. We would love to have you. We need more voices spanning across the state as well as different organizations. So we would love to have you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jenny Nakata, and I support the State Resource Navigation and Access Learning Network. Our learning network consists of over 80 partners who come together monthly, and together we learn about various resource systems and infrastructures across Washington state. So for example, we've learned about Washington 211, Within Reach, Help Me Grow, and the Healthcare Authority's Community Information Exchange. As a group, we learn from one another and plan ways to better collaborate across systems and share resources that serve children and families. All are welcome to join our monthly meetings on the first Friday, as you can see. We've been having some really exciting conversations about interoperability across systems and also local community resource directories. So if that sounds interesting at all to you, you're welcome to join us at our next meeting on March 3rd.
Great, thanks all for everybody on those quick updates. I hope you all just got a little bit of a taste of what the statewide learning networks are up to. We wanted to intentionally spend some time talking about the state learning network specifically, as we hope or think we know that many of you are familiar with the regional coalitions and that body of work. So I think my guess is we're probably at time as we're a bit over, but we did want to create some space for any questions that you all might have. Otherwise, please feel free to stop by our website, send us an email, and check out our Facebook and Instagram as I mentioned in the kind of summary of last year, streamlining communications has definitely been an area of focus for us. And so we hope there are many ways that you can get connected to the network.
Great. Thank you, Rachel and Colleen and all the network leaders. Are there any questions from anyone?
Awesome. Well, thank you all for having us. We really, really appreciate the time on the agenda today.
Great. Well, thank you again for a great presentation. It was actually really exciting watching the chat and seeing a few folks joining real time some of the learning networks. So that's absolutely wonderful. So it is 12:42. Right now, we are running a little late, but it is we're now going to break for lunch. And so everyone can step away, get lunch, maybe take a quick walk, and then we'll reconvene at 1:15. Thank you, everyone.
Hi all, it's a little bit, I see people are beginning to return. We are going to go ahead and get started. For the sake of time, and just welcome our colleagues as they all are returning. I want to welcome Vicki and Adassa, and they are going to share out with us about the FSKA, or Fair Starts for Kid Act evaluation and data update. So Vicki, I'm going to turn this over to you. Thank you very much for coming today. As always, we appreciate the information you are prepared to share with ELAC.
Thanks, Lois, and thanks again for having us. It's great to be here with all of you to share with you some data and evaluation updates from the Fair Start for Kids Act. Great, thanks. I'm here today with my colleague, Adassa Budrevic-Ryan, who is the Fair Start for Kids Act evaluator. And I'll turn it over to Adassa in just a moment for most of this presentation. Justin Seppi is our BI analyst who works on this project. Justin had planned to join us today, but was not able to at the last minute. And then we're also joined today by Min Wangbo from the Washington STEM, who is our external partner on the dashboards that you all may be familiar with. So we've invited Min to join us today as well. So we'll be hearing from 3 of us today. Go ahead and move to the next slide.
Thank you, Vicki. So if the slides work, there you go. So we're just gonna talk about 3 things today, since it's only half an hour. The first thing that we wanted to discuss was introducing a new analysis that we haven't talked with you all about yet in our series of analyses that we're sharing with you. And it's related to provider churn. And then we wanted to show you some visualizations about how we may go about depicting what provider churn looks like. And then finally, Min's going to give an update about the child care need and supply dashboard. So before we get into the details of the analysis, I wanted to bring us back and reorient us to our FSK logic model. We're going to present this every time because it really is our guiding framework. So I'll just really quickly redefine it again. So on the far left, we have the objectives column, which contains the 4 FSK policy objectives of advancing racial equity, expanding access to early learning and childcare, promoting kindergarten readiness, and stabilizing the workforce. The next column is all of these strategies that are laid out in the FSK legislation, and these strategies are implemented by DCYF staff and partners. And then the outputs column is primarily descriptive data about those strategies. So number of grants distributed, amounts of money distributed, and things like that. And then the outcome metric column is primarily where the FSK evaluation lives. It's more of these high-level outcome analyses that are attempting to show the impacts of FSK. And so the star is sort of foreshadowing that we're going to be talking today about the workforce stream of logic. Last time we talked about the equity stream, and we talked about childcare expulsions and how reducing those is part of equity. I believe that Eric sent out our sort of response in the feedback loop about us following up about those, so you should have the information. Today we wanted to talk about the workforce stream and sort of our provider churn analysis. In a second, Vicki is going to define it for us in the context of DCYF and talk about how we have historically measured churn. And I just kind of wanted to introduce it generally. So in general, churn is defined as the market's change in population. And I think it's tempting to sort of look at, oh, and I should say that the market that we're all interested in is the early learning and childcare market. And I think it's tempting to look at exits, but I think that doesn't encompass the full story when we just look at the population leaving. Looking at entries also helps us look at potential growth, and it can help with capacity building and planning for program development. So Vicky's going to talk to us about churn specifically related to DCYF childcare and early learning providers.
Thanks, Hadassah. And thanks for reminding us, Hadassah, where we are in bringing information. As you all are well aware, First Start for Kids is a huge piece of policy with lots of moving parts. And our attempt with the logic model and to continue to bring back pieces is to make sure that as we lead up to that first annual report that we are required to produce in September, that as we lead up to that, that you're having a chance to see the types of analyses that may be done, have input to those, and help us make it better as we go along. So we're going to try each time we're invited to bring a different stream. As Hadassah said, last time it was the equity stream, this time the workforce stream, and we'll bring the information on the other streams that more detailed in future meetings. So we think about provider churn and how it's measured. As Hadassah said, it refers to the dynamic nature of the market of child care provider organizations. Yes, and all these slides are distributed and available to you, yes, as are all of our past slides. Thanks for that, Debbie. So we're talking about the dynamic nature of the market of child care provider organizations. And we know this market has constant entries and exits. In our analyses of provider churn, we pay particular attention to how we measure the different components of the dynamic. We're interested in the total number of provider organizations that are providing services in any given year. We're interested in the entries, and that means the number of provider organizations that are new licenses in a given year, presumably providing some childcare in their year of entry, so the year their license starts. And we're interested in exits, the total number of provider organizations who closed a license in a given year, presumably providing some care during the year of exit. So in a given year, we can provide fairly readily the total number of provider organizations, but what's not always apparent in that given year when we look at data of the number of provider organizations maybe going up, maybe going down in a given year, what's not always clear when we look just at that static data is what the dynamic is behind it. How many of those providers are new or entry into the market that year, and how many have exited or closed their license that year. And these are data that can only be looked at in retrospect. We can see in retrospect for a given year that has already passed how many provider organizations there were, how many entered, and how many exited. Next slide, please. So in past, we've measured this in a particular way and presented it in a chart in a particular way. And here's an example from the old Early Start Act annual reports. For those of you who've been around long enough to have gone through the huge policy change that was the Early Start Act, in that report, we figured out a way to measure the total number of providers, those who exited and those who entered using the definition previous slide in any given year. And we reported this in Chapter 9 of the former Early Start Act annual report. Now for that report, we were only looking at providers serving children under 5 on subsidies. So we were really looking at a constrained box of a constrained segment of the child care provider organization market, because that's what was specific to the policy that was being implemented, and that's what was specific to the reporting requirements that we had from the legislature. So this is just an example of how we've done it in the past. As you can see on a single chart, we're able to see the total number of providers, and that corresponds with the axis on the right, the total number of providers, and on the and we were also able to see a line of the number of exiting and a line of the number of entering providers, which corresponds to the axis on the left. Whenever you have a system, a dynamic system with more units exiting than entering, you get over time a decreasing number of those units, whether you're measuring childcare provider organizations, whether you're measuring children in foster care, whether you're measuring many other things. So this is a dynamic that can be measured in many different systems: total, entering, exiting. Yeah, and in the old Early Start Act annual reports, we produced these reports for all subsidy providers serving children under 5. We also disaggregated the chart separately for centers and family homes so that the dynamic could be seen separately for not just for total providers, but for centers and family homes. And it allows us to readily do that. Next slide.
So I can bring us back and comment about how we're going to approach updating the provider churn analysis. So this time around, we're using a different data system and we have a wider universe. So whereas before, like Vicki said, we were only able, or at least mandated, to look at subsidy, this time we're going to be looking at all licensed childcare and early learning settings, including subsidy. Last time we were just looking at providers who were serving children under 5, and we would like to include providers who serve school-age children, so we'll be including ages 0 to 12. And last time, because we were restricted to only subsidy providers, I believe the way that we looked at it was whether or not they stopped getting payment as a form of exit. And this time, since we have a new data system, we're actually going to be looking at license status. So was a new license open that year, or did one close that year? So in a second, I'm going to be showing you some updated churn charts. And sort of the format, there's only 3. Justin made them. I wanted to give him credit. And he did say he would love to try to attend a future ELAC meeting. So for each chart, we're going to describe what we're seeing and then some pros and cons. I'm also in the chat going to write the title of the chart. And we'd love if you just gave us some quick emoji reactions to how you feel about it. We thought that that would be, since there's so many of us, we could get feedback from everyone in a quick manner. Okay.
Adasa, just a clarification before you dive in.
Yes.
Are these, can you clarify whether the charts we're going to see are actual data or whether they're test data? Because I know sometimes we do this with test data. And I think just a reminder, the point of the exercise is try to choose which of these or which combination of these kinds of visualizations might be most useful for the report. Is that right?
So it is, I believe, actual data. It's not hypothetical. And yeah, we'd love your emoji reactions to all the charts, but if you could also comment, you know, your prioritized list or which one you thought was the best, made sense the most to you, that'd be helpful as well. Okay, so this is the staff bar chart. Let me write that in the chat really quick. So this visual helps us see the total number of providers in a given year, the number of providers who exited, the number of new providers, and the number of retained providers. So you may notice that's one new difference, is we're looking at retained providers this time as well. And so since this is a new variable, we wanted to just define it really quick. Retained providers are those who were retained from the previous year into the current year. So the pros of the stacked bar chart is it helps us show the total number of providers in a given year, and we can easily compare the various categories within a year. The con, though, is that it is a little harder to compare, for instance, the exits and the retained providers across years. So we can't really see how big of, or I guess a precise change of retained providers. It gets a little easier if you look at exits, but it's just not precise enough. So I'm seeing a couple of comments. I just didn't want to go to the next chart unless people had more emojis or reactions.
They're all, so Min, to answer your question, all of these providers would have been providing a service in that year, in that calendar year. But the exits closed their license during the year, and the entries, this is the first year of the license. But they all would have provided some service during that year, or presumed to have provided some service during that year.
I'll go ahead and show the next graph, but oh, maybe in a second.
I'll answer Olivia's question. Olivia, we do have some information at the employee staff level, and we'll hope to be able to do this kind of work in future and produce these kinds of graphs in future at the employee staff level. But today, and probably for this year's report, we're talking just about provider organizations. Thanks for the question. That was a great idea.
So because with the stacked bar chart, it's kind of harder to look across years, but really good for looking within years, we have the line chart. And so this visual helps us see better how the various categories change over time. It's easier to see trends in exits or new providers year over year. So the pros is that we can easily look at trends and patterns, and we can compare the categories over time a little easier. The pros though, or sorry, the cons though, is that it's harder to understand how these categories influence each other in a given year. So it's harder to look vertically rather than horizontally. So for example, we can see that exits lowered in 2022, but we're not really sure how that's influencing total providers or retained providers. Oops. Sorry that I forgot to write line chart, but go ahead and you have feedback. Gotcha. So because it's harder to see sort of like vertically and how the categories influence each other within a given year, we have our final chart, which is the waterfall chart. So this visual helps us illustrate the change in providers within a year and across years. So it does both. The blue bar shows us the beginning of the year providers and those retained from the previous year. So at the end of 2018, we had 5,536 providers, and at the beginning of 2019, we have the same amount. The orange bar then shows us the exits. So it starts at the same level as the blue chart, but then we see that it goes down by 496. The green bar graph shows us the number of new providers. So again, it starts at the same level as the exits, but we see it go up by 637. And that's kind of why they call it a waterfall chart, because it's kind of like zigzags up and down, up and down, up and down. This isn't a very common graph. Justin told me it's primarily used in like the finance field. But the pros of it is that we can visualize change over a given period in a year. And we can see whether there's variation in exits or new providers, and we can see how exits and new providers changes the total number. Again, sort of the cons is it's unfamiliar, so it might be difficult to read if you have never seen these before. And as with the stacked bar chart, we were able to see, the total number of providers. It's harder to understand that from the waterfall chart. So that's kind of the last con. This is kind of the end of our portion of the presentation before Min takes over. So I just wanted to see if there's any general feedback or questions before I hand it over to him, because I know we're running short on time a little.
Adasa, is it true we could do some combination of this, right, to mitigate any cons that we identified? So for instance, if we did get some positive feedback on both the stacked and the line chart, there's no reason we couldn't do both a stacked and a line chart and put that in the report, and then maybe supplement with a table with some specific numbers in case people were interested in the exact numbers, like what we see in the waterfall chart, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Justin and I were just talking about that yesterday, that we don't always have to choose one. One chart makes up for what the other one lacks. So of course we can have multiple ways to tell the story. So okay, I'm gonna hand it over to Min.
So Debbie suggested maybe combining waterfall and stacked and do like the line chart for different reasons. So yeah, they each have their advantage, right? And seeing the actual numbers, we know many people will want to see the actual numbers in addition to a chart. So supplementing with either a table or some other way that we can see the actual numbers and provide those, I think, seems to be important. Thanks, Debbie. Any other feedback on these? Thanks, Reagan. Adasa, let's make a note of Reagan's comment so that Justin can see if we can identify in the data those providers that have moved, closed one license and opened a new one at a new address. If we can identify them in the data, Reagan will figure out a way to show them. Thanks for that. Okay. Appreciate the feedback. If you get to look at these later or have other thoughts later, we'll have our emails at the end of this, and you're free to reach out directly to Adasa with feedback at any time. Move on to the next slide. There we go. I'm going to introduce Min Huangbo, who is the Impact Director at Washington STEM. WashSTEM is our partner on the need and supply dashboards and some other early learning dashboards that are posted on our external website. I have a link there to our current need and supply dashboard that hasn't been updated for some time, and Min has been working hard along with Justin at creating a new version that Min will show you today for feedback. Take it away, Min.
Thank you, Vicki. And I'd love to actually be able to share my screen as well. And if you want to take a look at our supply demand dashboard that has been currently updated on the website, it's not on the website yet, but I have posted the demo link for your information so you can browse and interact with it. Thank you so much. So a couple of changes since we have met in December last time. There are 3 different sort of updates that I can provide today. One is that last time when we were updating this supply and demand dashboard, the data sources were coming from estimated percentage childcare need, that sort of data that's been simulated or projected as a data that's been calculated. So not really the real data. We actually now have the live data that's feeding this dashboard so that we can update this more often, so more frequently and quarterly basis, so that the data that you're seeing today is actually presenting the information that you have that our license providers have reported in January 2023. So it's most up to date. Second thing that I would like to note is that in the past, if you remember, and if you think about the version that we have produced in the past, the age group in an SMI has not been specified in a way that you can actually filter it into 4 different distinctions. So for instance, age group with infant toddlers kind of like merged together. So we have split that information into 4 different categories, including the school age group, as well as the state median income information, especially around 60% to 85%, which is the gray area that we're always experiencing with somewhat private pay, but not really. Like those gray area has been illustrated here as well. So you have more information for your own regional needs, or anyone who's interested in looking into your own data set that's actually showing you information about estimated need met in that particular SMI and particular age group. The third one is actually not on this channel, but I have heard many of you have said you would like to see the raw data set of our dashboard. So if you go to data.wa.gov, and then on the search bar, if you type in childcare need and supply, we have these 4 different sort of data set that Justin has been helping me updating regular basis on the data.wa.gov, that you can actually see the raw data in a CSV or Excel file. So I'll show you exactly how you do that. So it looks a little bit complicated, but it's not. Bear with me. If you go to up and export here, you'll be able to see it as a CSV or CSV for Excel for your information, as well as if you just click on the view data, it's going to show you exactly how our data set has been cleaned or cleared up for each of the county with the child GeoID and then the needs number that's been estimated, or I should say counted for January 2023 version on this website. So any questions related to how to access to data as well, I think we have that information as well on the data.wa.gov that's been going to be updated after we push the live dashboard.
Thanks, Min, for showing that. I'll just note that the link to these sheets is always at the bottom of the dashboard. So if you're accessing the dashboard and want to get this, you don't have to bookmark it today. It will always be available at the bottom of the dashboard sheet. Thanks, Min.
So if you go to early learning dashboards on the DCYF website and you click on the view dashboard, so this is the older version. We're updating the newer version that I've just shared with you today. If you scroll down all the way down, the hyperlinks that Vicky mentioned is on the bottom of the screen that says data files by county, legislative district, zip code, and school district. Any questions or comments or feedback before we go to the next agenda item?
Thanks, Min. I appreciate all the work you've done on updating the need and supply dashboard. It's been a while coming, and I know we've got a lot of people waiting for it, so it'll be great to have it up. We hope to have it up in the next day or two. We're just finalizing a couple of final backside details before we post it. I want to acknowledge Debbie's comment in the chat about additional data for the report. We'll make note of these, Debbie, so we're sure to track them. Provider churn by county, we may be able to do in table form in the report, so we'll look at the feasibility of that. We don't yet have wage and benefit data inside DCYF, although we're working to get it through a data share agreement with Employment Security. And then, of course, provider retention, we're interested in reporting and working actively on producing those data in a way that are replicable. So you'll likely see those in future reports. Great. So that was our quick run through of the latest update. We're happy to come as frequently as you'll have us. You have our contact information for all 4 of us who are working on this project on the last slide of the slide deck that's distributed. Feel free to reach out to any of us at any time. Thanks so much, Lois, for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vicki and team. It is always so wonderful to have you, and you can tell by the engagement from our members. So thank you so much. I'm looking forward, I know I am, to accessing information on the data board, on the data that you shared about today and the website, and for your willingness to always incorporate our suggestions. So thank you, Vicki, appreciate it so much. now I'm going to turn this over to Enrica, and she is going to introduce our next group of presenters. I also want to remind everyone that you still have a chance if you think about something that resonated with you on any of the information that was shared today. You can always include that at the end of the meeting in our Menti surveys. And our CE team, community engagement team, will then share that with DCYF staff, and they'll follow up with any information that we still need. So, Enrica.
Great, thank you, Lois, and thank you again, Vicki, Adasa, and Min. So yes, I'm here to introduce Matt Judge, Child Care Administrator, as well as Rachel Brown Kendall, and they are both here this afternoon to provide us with an update on the early learning division structure. So I will turn it over to Matt and Rachel.
Hi, everybody. As was said, my name is Matt Judge. My title has actually changed. More on that in just a moment. I'm the administrator for the Federal Initiatives and Collaboration Unit. And I'm joined today by Rachel Brown Kendall, the Quality Recognition and Improvement System Administrator. And we're here, I believe, at ELAC's request to provide, to share some information about Department of Children, Youth, and Families Early Learning Division structure and our recent reorganization. And so excited to do that. Next slide, please. Just to give you an overview of the conversation today, we'll talk a bit about the origins of the early learning division as it now exists under the reorganization, talk about the 4 main areas that work is grouped under in the division since the reorganization, get a little bit of feedback, hopefully, from you all, maybe some advice about naming one of the really crucial teams that has formed under that reorganization. Naming that has been a little bit of a challenge for us, so hoping you might have some feedback. And then, of course, some time to answer any questions that you might have. So next slide, thanks. This reorganization was effective October 16, 2022. DCYF's Early Learning Division has a new organizational structure with 4 key areas. I'll describe those in a moment. But the purpose of the change was really to help our staff and ensure children, families, and providers get what they need when they need it, with more clarity and fewer barriers. And this reorganization was really based in conversations that have been going on since this unit formed back in October 2021. And we've really, learned a lot from our partners as well through those conversations about ways that we could break down silos, improve alignment and integration of those programs. And so the reorganization is a culmination of some of those conversations, but is also part of ongoing work that we know we'll have to do. So next slide, please. These are the 4 areas that that our teams are forming under. And in a moment, Rachel will kind of help us through some specifics about where teams are located within these. But to give you the broad overview, up in the upper left here, we have child and family access, bringing together child and family facing programs to improve the experience for children and families, including but not limited to early learning settings, eligibility, and enrollment processes. Down in the lower left, we have operations and provider supports. This brings together daily operations to help minimize duplication and increase efficiency as a division. So you can think of things like HR, finance, facilities, safety, communications, and contracts that impact providers. In the upper right here, this is the work area and team with a name to be determined, but really critical work here. This brings together systems and services around quality, teaching and learning, workforce data, and other supports for providers, business owners, and families. And then last but not least is my area, or our area here in the Federal Initiatives and Collaboration Unit. This is bringing together the cross-sector and cross-agency collaboration and coordination with federal partners to strengthen our early learning system. And then on the next slide here, Rachel will start to walk us through a little bit more of the concrete projects and initiatives and teams under these different work areas.
Thanks, Matt. Hello, everybody. It's so nice to see you all. It's fun to see faces I haven't seen in a long time. It's been a while since I've been to ELAC. So again, my name is Rachel Brown Kendall. You may have heard me referred to as RBK. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm really excited about the work that we have been doing over the last couple of years in this new early learning division. And Matt, you just talked through all the 4 sections, and this slide here just really provides a little bit more detail. So if you were looking at that, the visual of the different circles, the purposes that Matt talked through are all listed out here, match up to that visual. And so when we think about our I've got to go back and look at the visual myself. When we think about our child and family access, we talked about how that brings together all of those operations pieces, but this is where we have the provider grants team. I mean, who doesn't love the grants team? They're out there, helping providers access more resources to increase the quality in their programs and really meet some important investments in their programs. They're also provider payment systems and needs, the healthcare benefits. So there's a lot of things that are not just the internal work that happens within our division, but the external facing processes that providers are accessing in order to gain benefit to different supports and resources. And then with child and family access, here we're bringing together the child care subsidy and ECAP teams and our early ECAP team and Eclipse. So it's a wonderful way to start thinking about how does eligibility look? How do these programs work together? How do we make this a more streamlined system for not just the providers, but for families as they're accessing the supports that our agency provides to families? And I think that that's one of the things that is really exciting about this early learning division coming together the way that it has. DCYF was really created to do something new and innovative with all of the different suite of services that live within our agency, and thinking about all the different families and the different provider types that exist out in the big wide world. And we were really asked to think about how do we do this better for kids and families. And, we came together in, what was it, 2018? My gosh, that seems like it was so long ago. But we came together and we started out, we went with a prototype, right? We split into different work divisions. And what we realized is there was some improvement that we could do. And the creation of the early learning division was one of those things that we learned. We learned that, the ECAP and the Head Start and Eclipse really need to be brought together with subsidy and quality and professional development and that grants team, that all of these things really work together more holistically as a system to support providers so that we ourselves can, streamline our own work, but for the benefit of those that we're serving. And so I think that that's one of the really exciting things that I think is forthcoming with this new division. So, and then Matt talked about his area of work, and then this new team, this TBD. Angela and I have joked about it being the dream team, and she and I have worked together for a long time collaboratively because, if you've known me from my past, it's been early achievers. I have been a part of the early achievers system since early achievers rolled out in various roles from different agencies, but here I am. And but early achievers has been, very tightly woven into professional development work. And so it just makes sense to bring these two bodies together. And the professional development team does so much more than just PD, and so that branding doesn't match. And we're so much more than early achievers, but we're really trying to think about what is our identity as we bring these groups together. And, Matt talked about the work that our management team did, the early learning division management team did over the course of the last year to really understand the body of work that was coming together, what each of us was leading, what were the nuances of what we do, and where were the places that we needed to work more closely together, and what could we do to improve, our experience, our staff's experience, and, families' experience and providers' experiences. And, and we're in that space right now. I think that our team, this TBD team, probably has the greatest impact of bringing together more new staff than others. And so we have spent time over the last several months really trying to understand, who are we? What is our new identity? We don't want to just come in and say, we're this new thing and this is what it is. We're like, we are also trying to understand how we show up for ourselves in this work, and how our partners out in the field see us, how our advisory groups see us, how our contractors see us, and understanding that. And so we've spent some time asking some folks some questions about that, and asking ourselves the same thing. Like, how do we see our work? What does this look like for us going forward? Because this it's not an overtaking. It's not PD didn't absorb early achievers didn't absorb PD, but we really are coming together to create something new. Just like when we brought together the different former organizations to create DCYF, it's kind of that same thing. We want to create something new so that we can continue to be better. I mean, maybe better isn't the right word, but that's the one I'm using right now. And so we have this, we're interested in your input about this. And if you go to the next slide for me, thank you. So this new unit brings together the professional development and the early achievers team. And we're interested just to see what you all think. So we have this survey that I would love to toss in the chat. I don't know if you've got that link handy. If not, I can drop it in. I'm gonna look to see. Let's see, I think I can do it. So we have this fun survey. It's super simple. It's 2 questions and an option to elaborate if you're interested. But we would love to hear your input about what you think describes us as a work team. When you think about professional development and workforce and quality, and I'm not going to list out all the words, you've got them in the slides. But when you think about that work and you think about early achievers and what that could look like coming together, what really resonates for you? Some of the things that we have thought about are professional growth, quality, and innovation. That's one of the names that we were tossing about. Another one is just professional growth and innovation. And another is quality practice and professional growth. So, and then of course we have the option for other. Maybe you've got some different words that you would use to describe our work. And so we're really interested just to see what you all think about this. And then if you had to choose one, then you get the option to pick your top pick. And if there are other things that you want to share with us, you have an opportunity to do that here. So I welcome your input and in helping us, think about our identity. And then if you have any questions about this coming together, Matt and I are here. We are happy to answer any questions that we can and take down anything that we don't have the answer to so we can bring it back to you in a future meeting.
Rachel, this is Debbie Ham. I'm from Southwest and part of Washington Communities for Children. And first of all, I'm happy to and appreciate the opportunity to consider the name of this, new division, I guess the right word. But as I read the list of the different things that are in this one box, and I think about our community, and I think about the providers, the staff that we have, the providers that we work with throughout the region, and on a daily basis, every single one of those touches our life. And to me personally, the thing that is missing the most is DCYF really taking seriously what we're doing in communities and what we have the access to. I mean, what we're talking about now is in community, for community, and by community, because we don't have all the answers, but we have a lot of partnerships and relationships. And what happens in Southwest, even in Clark County versus Klickitat County, for example, is not exactly the same, because the communities are different, the people are different, but we hold all of that. And my historical perspective of how the systems have emerged is that there are work groups, there are people who are talking together, but I'm talking about authentic. Let communities bring to you what we know and think and understand, and see how we can work together to make them happen, as opposed to, and I don't want to disparage anybody. I don't mean that. It's just that things are really challenging, and now even more than they were before. And if we can't figure out in the state how to really authentically bring community voice and honor community voice for how we, how programs look, what the requirements are, what reimbursement looks like, how we blend them all together. Because that in Washington Communities for Children, we have people representing all of those different programs and priorities around the state. And I just don't guess, I don't know a better way to say it than it can't be top down anymore, because it's not working. And but we have so much capacity in communities, given the right partnerships with the state and learning together, as opposed to just trying to implement what we're given. And again, I'm not trying to disparage anybody, but it's just, I kind of wish and invite anybody to come down and just see some of the things that we're doing in our region. I'm sure other regions would be happy to have that as well, because something needs to change in how decisions are made, and clarity, and really understanding what's happening in community. And I don't know how a better way to describe it. I won't say it this again, but I just really think that's something that will help us be more successful in supporting childcare, ECAP, early achievers, all of those different programs, and doing it in a way that meets the needs of the children and families in the community. And one size just doesn't fit all. And I don't know how if we aren't there helping you understand. So I just wanted to throw that out, because I really believe there's a way to do it. I'm not sure, I don't have all the answers, but I just feel like it's really important that this conversation be had.
Thank you, Debbie. I really appreciate your feedback and your insight there. And, I think that I'm speaking for myself personally in my experience in the last couple of years, the importance of authentic engagement with community in the work that we did in revising early achievers was really transformational to, I think, our internal early achievers work team and our early achievers partners. And it's been transformational to the system. So I understand the benefit of engaging in that. And I do believe that our early learning division also understands that benefit. And it's really important for us to hear about what is working and what isn't working. So I appreciate you sharing that insight. And yeah, there's other feedback that people want to share, please. I see some good questions in the chat. I mean, they're all good questions, right? So it says, this is great work, lots of work, lots of amazing work, excuse me. A couple of questions for families. Are there resources for LGBTQ plus families that help them identify LGBTQ plus friendly services, especially around gender identity development? That is a great question. And are there resources for families if their children might have disabilities? So services, what families should know, where to find developmental screenings, etc. Also another fantastic question. And, I don't think that we have a widespread place within our division, but there are places within the work streams. So I really am intrigued about the LGBTQ plus family supports and finding programs with that are LGBTQ plus friendly services. I think that that's an interesting thing for us to continue to discuss with our within our division and our racial equity and social justice office to figure out how might we be able to make that more public, because I know that there are programs that are offering those supports and resources for families if their children might have disabilities. Yes, and that would be with ESIT and with Eclipse and ECAP all have specialized services for families that have exceptional children or children with exceptional needs, and within many childcare programs offer developmental screening. And so part of that is looking to see what the program is that you're choosing. Anything else that others would offer? That's not my area of expertise, but certainly.
Well, I might not be capturing the full answer to the question, but in the second one about strategy alignment between prenatal to third grade in the chat there, I just want to plug the preschool development grant administrator and her team, Tracy Kenny, because I think a lot of we're doing a substantial amount of work around that alignment and working with family supports, Judy King's team. And even though it's called the Preschool Development Grant, really the federal funds are funding a wide variety of work that speaks to Birth to 8, including the Early Learning Coordination Plan, which is just newly released. And I will put the link to that here in the chat as well. I think there's some discussion about alignment in there.
Hi, sorry, I was the one that asked those questions. I'm actually referring to, I thought you had a family, and I don't have the chart in front of me anymore, a family section. So it was really, the question was, is this being designed for families to go to? And, another resource that you're providing for families to go to, which I appreciate all the things that you said around resources. So for example, is the ESET, is all the ECAP, all of that there for families to see? Of course, it's overwhelming for families. So we're always trying to strategize around how to get information to families. And then this might be more for the sector itself, but I know parents, I think families and parents are also interested in this, and just understanding like and correct me if I'm wrong, like part of your goal is a kind of centralized place where early learning providers, families can find this information. And that's what I'm also referring to as far as, what DCYF is doing, how you're engaging with communities on really aligning strategy from birth to the third grade or 0 to 8. Sorry if that wasn't clear.
No, that's really great. That's helpful feedback in terms of how we frame things too. Because I think that what we're talking about with family access is like us helping families access, but I love the, thinking about a centralized locations for families to access information. We've got Help Me Grow is a fantastic resource, or the Parent Help 123. And I think that those two kind of parallel the work that we're doing, but are really more targeted towards family supports. But I think that this is really good feedback for us in terms of how we talk about the work that we do, so that DCYF can be really clear with families about where they should go for information and how we are being responsive.
And one thing I just wanted to add was that I think that, among other things, bringing together the Working Connections childcare subsidy program and ECAP in one unit is really a first step toward facilitating those conversations where to make it easier for families to access our programs. just that structural change allows more collaboration between those programs. And, you know, we requested in our decision packages that alignment between ECAP, Head Start, and subsidy be aligned. And I think that that's part of kind of advancing that one door for families, making the process more simpler on their end.
Lois, I see you've asked when is the deadline to name the new group, and if we're partnering with Trusted Messengers to share this ask with the field. I don't know if you'd be interested in unmuting about the part about the Trusted Messengers, but we have been, I will say it's not like we're in a race to the finish line, but I think that everybody would love to be able to make a decision. But I think that we didn't talk about how long we were going to leave our survey open. So let's say we leave it open for the rest of the week, so that people have an opportunity to provide their input. It won't take long to answer the 2 questions, so that's good. It won't take much energy there. But
so maybe the can you hear me, Rachel?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. Maybe the communications group can send something out to the field and let them know, and it might be a good idea to give them till at least Monday. You know, so folk have a full week from whenever they send the message out to be able to share their input. And I was just looking at it too, it might not hurt if you can change it so that for those 2 options that instead of having folk put in other at the bottom of the survey, but just to open it up so they can just write in other, just to make it a little bit easier for folk to access. And then just want to remind ELAC, if you scroll up, you'll see the survey there. But I'm thinking that way you have the input from the field, or at least that opportunity, as well as maybe utilizing Child Care Aware Washington or some of the regions to be able to just shoot it out. You know, early achievers, let folk know, tell them this is the deadline, and at least that way more folk have an option to weigh in. And that's who I'm thinking of, you know, Trusted Messengers. So as well as, you know, the usual suspects, Voices of Tomorrow, Imagine, so on and so forth.
Thank you, Lois. Great feedback.
Hi, Nigel Lawrence, Suquamish tribal member, ELAC member. I know I met Matt before, lots of meetings. Thanks, guys. I was looking at the chart and trying to figure out where tribes fit in that, relationships with tribes. Hopefully all 4 of those categories, divisions. I just didn't see any mention of them in there, but it's assumed they're in there.
That is a wonderful point to make, Nigel. And yes, absolutely. Our partnerships with tribes is critical to all of the work that is encompassed within the early learning division. And it is not explicitly called out. So thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I guess I did want to state that I think one of the reasons that the Federal Initiatives and Collaboration Team, part of that name, is really coming in part with the collaboration with tribal partners, tribal programs, tribal nations. But yeah, good feedback. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having us. You know, I love being able to be here and share with you, and I appreciate the thoughtful questions and the feedback about how the information is presented and the suggestions about trusted messengers and maybe some modifications to the survey to help us get the best feedback possible.
Great. Thank you so much, Rachel, and thank you, Matt, for taking the time to meet with us and to hold this discussion so we can learn more about the structure of the early learning division. So it is 2:18 right now, and we are going to give everyone a break. You know, feel free to step away, stretch, maybe take a quick walk, and come back at 2:30 for our next presenter. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Hi all, it is 2:31, so we're going to come back together. And now we're going to go over the cost of care and subsidy rate model. And it looks like our presenters, I see Jason's on there. I don't have him on our agenda, but if he's here, that's great. Hi, Matt, always good to see your face. So Matt Judd and Rachel Brown Kendall. And I also see Nicole Rolls as one of our presenters are going to share information with our group and an update on the cost of care rate model charter and the work plan. So I will turn this over. I don't know, Matt, if you're leading out or not.
It'll actually be Jason.
Or if, okay, all right, great. So I'll turn it over to the team. Thank you.
Thanks, Lois, and sorry for the mix-up on the presenters today. Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Mikey. I'm the Child Care Subsidy Administrator, and I'm joined by Matt Judge, who's pulling double duty on presentations today. And Matt is the Federal Initiatives and Collaboration Administrator with DCYF. And as Lois mentioned, we're here to discuss the cost of care and subsidy rate model work. We'll move on to the next slide. Today, we're going to focus. Today we're going to discuss the purpose, the timeline, the cost of care model. We're going to discuss the engagement recommendation, and we have some time set aside where we can have some discussion and feedback on our plan. With that, I'll pass over to Matt.
Hey, everybody. Just wanted to ground us first in why we're in front of you all today. First, to start with the backgrounds behind this work. I think Frank Ordway was alluding to a broader issue with provider compensation earlier, but I think we start there. To state it plain, child care subsidy rates do not cover providers' full costs to provide high quality care, and this ultimately limits family access to the child care subsidy program. To address this problem with the Fair Start for Kids Act, the legislature directed Department of Children, Youth, and Families to recommend a model basing the rates in subsidy on the cost of care. The Child Care Collaborative Task Force has been working on this topic for a couple of years now and released a cost of care study and recommendations in December. And so we're really here today to discuss picking up that work and our recommendations for engagement on further developing that model toward a full rate model for the child care subsidy program. So next slide, please. Just to further ground us and maybe at the risk of being obvious, just wanted to kind of locate this work within the broader universe of early care and education in Washington State and DCYF's role in it. The dark circle slightly off to the left, you see there, dark blue is the whole world of licensed child care. And you can see the numbers there. And then located within that is a subset of licensed child care providers who accept child care subsidies. And so we're really talking about this chunk and what the reimbursement to those providers from the state is. So this is neither to overblow nor underestimate kind of the impact of the work we're doing when we talk about the rate model for child care subsidy. Next slide, please. Again, just more grounding here. This is kind of the timeline, zoomed in parts of recent and near future work that's going to be done. You can see that in the fall here, the Child Care Collaborative Task Force submitted to the legislature the cost study and recommendations on a cost model to the legislature. And then to take that forward and really translate that work into the child care subsidy program, the job before us is to develop the rate model for that. So building from that cost study. And then beyond that, we'll do another survey of providers so that we make sure that this cost model that we're working on will be based on up-to-date data. And then finally, in 2024, before the 2025 session, DCYF is to make recommendations to the legislature on adopting the rate model and the recommendations developed for child care subsidy rates. Next slide, please. So in doing this work, we can really break it down into two broad buckets or categories that are elements of the rate model that really drive what the base rate would be for a given provider. And so that's looking at identifying and recommending options within the model that will influence the rate. And I'll have some examples of that to make it more concrete in just a moment. And then identifying and recommending the rate regions. Again, more on that next slide, please. So just to give you some examples here, and these aren't exhaustive, there could be more, but some of the things that need to be addressed in terms of the cost variables are on the left-hand side there. This includes staff salaries, including those for the owners and operators of these programs, benefits such as vacation and sick days, retirement insurance and flexible spending, curriculum costs in these programs, the costs of parent engagement, for example, parent conferences. So the work that is ahead of us is kind of determining what assumptions might be built into a recommendation to the legislature on these and how that would influence rates. Further influencing rates, you might already be aware that in the child care subsidy program, providers are paid based on their geographic region, among other things. So there are 6 regions plus Spokane at the moment. So we can take a look at options that include that, but can also factor in cost of living in any given area, or an area's median income, or breaking down regions into urban, suburban, and rural classifications. So all of those things need to be discussed in developing the rate model from where we're at right now. Next slide, please. This is just to kind of talk about the authorizing environment around the work, and to the extent that it might have constraints upon the decisions we can make. As I think I mentioned earlier, this is all coming from Fair Start for Kids Act, and you can see the language there in the first bullet about what they directed DCYF to do around a cost of care model. And I highlighted there that they're saying that we're to recommend subsidy rates at levels sufficient to compensate licensed or certified childcare providers for the full cost of providing high quality childcare. This is just to say that DCYF doesn't get just to decide what those rates will be. We will develop a model through this work and recommendations, and the final decision is to be made by the state legislature. And just to be clear, family child care providers who participate in the subsidy program and receive subsidy payments collectively bargain through their union SEIU 925, and nothing in the Fair Start for Kids Act language around this cost of care model or any of our work diminishes their collective bargaining rights under the law. And then finally, the payments to providers that we're developing a rate model for come from the federal government. And so any methods that we use to determine those rates, including this cost model, have to be approved by the Federal Office of Child Care. And we're actively working to move through that process and get their approval. And so I think Jason will take the next slide where we talk about how we might engage others in doing this work.
Thanks, Matt. DCYF's goal is to engage partners and tribes to develop the rate model work and recommendations, and to be nimble through this intensive and impactful work. Next slide, please. DCYF invites public participation, focusing on the involve and collaborate areas of the IAP2 spectrum of public participation. And we have a visual here highlighting our efforts in involving the public and collaborating and developing a model in joint. Let's move to the next slide. DCYF recommends working with the existing early educator co-design group in 2 phases. Phase 1, as Matt highlighted, is to develop the rate variable recommendations. And phase 2 is to develop the provider region and grouping recommendations. You have to have phase 1 before we move into phase 2. We plan on doing that over the next 6 months, 6 to 8 months. And each phase will include discussion and feedback sessions with ELAC, provider supports, Indian Policy Early Learning Committee, and Service Employees International Union 925. And again, we want to highlight that this does not interfere with family providers' right to collectively bargain. Let's move to the next slide and we can talk a little bit more about our timeline. The possible timeline is to work through phase 1 in spring of 2023. So in the next few months. Phase 2, focusing on provider grouping and discussion selection, moves into summer 2023. And as we move into fall, we work to gather federal approval. And then moving into 2024, we will rework the cost of care survey to update the costs and meet the CCDF plan requirements. And all of this culminates at the end of 2024 with the decision package placed to the governor just in time for the 2025 legislative session. Let's move into our next slide. We have 3 slides that describe the early educator co-design work group participants. And we'll just take a moment to look through these. And as we look through these, I invite Deanne, who I saw on the phone or on the meeting, I hope she's still here, to add any additional information about this group.
Yeah, I'm happy to, Jason. Yeah, the early educator design group really has been working over the last 6 months to develop a compensation initiative and talks. It's a group that we pulled together at CCFY to inform and bring beneficiary voice fully into the leadership role around our direction around compensation. So this is a group that has been working together for a good while, is deeply steeped in, has had some shared education around the challenges around compensation and the levers that are available through government and other entities, and is grown used to talking through challenging and gnarly decisions. And so as you can see, that it's representative geographically, race and ethnicity, and we have quite a number of monolingual Spanish speaker representatives as well. So we have real-time interpretation services throughout all of our meetings. So we feel like we've covered the landscape in terms of representation while keeping the group at about 33 people, and knitting together a working relationship that could serve this process really well.
Thank you, Deanne. We can move into the next slide and highlight some more of the work, group that Deanne mentioned. This highlights the primary language and the makeup of the workforce of the group. And as we move to the next slide, this really highlights the different program characteristics of the members within the group. And with that, we can move to the end of our discussion. We have a couple questions that we'd like to discuss. What are your thoughts about this recommendation, and how would the parent advisory group like to be involved in this process? And are there any other questions or feedback? And I look at the time and we're right on time. We were hoping for about half our time to be dedicated to some discussion. So thank you, everyone.
So guys, is the plan for us to break into small groups? Is that what we're going to be doing? And then also, I know that you're going to be sharing this slide with different groups. So yeah, how would the Early Learning Advisory Council like to be involved in the feedback process? So I'm going to as the CE team, I think at this point, since we've been listening quite a bit, if we could do breakout groups, that might be good. Is the plan to use, how do you plan to collect our feedback?
I think we were planning on having 15 minutes. So the original plan was to have just dialogue with the group and take that feedback for a recommendation. If we go into breakout rooms, working through a mechanism to try to get that feedback. I don't know what the easiest mechanism is without having something set up to go into that, unless our facilitators have a way to throw up a Miro board or something similar to capture notes.
I think we could throw together a Jamboard fairly quickly and have everyone break off into discussion groups. If that's something that ELAC would like to do with this exercise, we can absolutely get that set up. Or as a second option, if, as Jason had mentioned, maybe keeping it here in the general discussion. And of course, we are capturing all audio. And then as well, any sort of thoughts or recommendations, you're more than welcome to place those in chat as well. And that will give us an opportunity, I think, to facilitate some different conversations. But we can kind of do it either way. I know I'm speaking for Jess here, if we can throw together a Jamboard. She's typically pretty fast. Lois, your thoughts, or Enrica, on how you would like to further this dialogue? Or anyone? Oh, we got you on mute, Lois.
Sorry about that. I had
No
myself
worries.
on mute. Not your fault, Eric. I think it would be nice, since we have a little bit of time, even if it's just, 10 minutes or so. I don't know how much time it takes, but it would have been nice to be able to come together and talk about this and what our recommendations are. Also, if you guys could put the recommendation back on the screen, I think that would be helpful too. So if we are going to stay together as a group, it might spark a little bit more conversation. I think we're reaching brain fatigue right now. So I'm just trying to think of ways to infuse a little caffeine into the discussion.
And I just saw a comment in the chat that Nancy indicating would love a breakout to think out loud. I guess Jason and Matt, will that provide you what you need? I noticed that question number 2, it looks like you're asking something pretty specific of the parent advisory group.
Yeah, I think that works. Really, the idea is to workshop with the co-design work group, work through the details, come back to each of the advisory committees to work through what those recommendations are, giving a second layer of review and approval before we somewhat solidify those recommendations and then move forward in phase 2, and then ultimately coming back together and building the model. We did add in the parent advisory group because through our process, we were looking at providers and the provider supports committees, and we know the parent advisory group is participating today, and we wanted to hear specifically how they would like to be involved through this process as well. I think perhaps we could go into breakout rooms. It seems like that's the idea, and we can have some free-form discussions and brainstorming, and maybe one person from each of the groups could consolidate the discussion, and we can get that back to a point person for consolidating.
It looks
Yeah,
like
it
there's a
looks like
Jamboard.
Eric.
Yeah, there you go. I was going to say,
I
Eric, if
didn't-
you needed anything, let me know, but it looks like
Okay.
one's in there.
Yeah, let me, it's a general Jamboard. Let me get the question in there. And then this at least gives everyone a place to go and start providing some of those comments.
And make sure that
using-
you give the editing access, because right now it's not
Gotcha. That one, I will make sure. Let's.
So Jason and Matt, since we're looking at time, would it be helpful for you if we go into breakout groups, as I'm sure Jess is working on that now, that we put our comments in the Jamboard, and then because we're losing our folk, I see Debbie had to go, Aida had to go, and now Val is leaving too, to be able to share that out with ELAC. And yeah, we're losing folks rapidly. For us to be able to share that out with ELAC and then be able to get back to you within, a week or 2 weeks, something like that, so that folk have a chance to share it out with our network, so that they can weigh in. And that would also give the CE team a chance to really put the questions in there. Because looking at the number of folks that we have now compared to earlier, and the fact that we are losing more people, we want to make sure that the feedback you have is really helpful.
Yeah, that would be okay.
I have the breakouts ready to go. Did you want to do 10 minutes or?
Yes, why don't we? It'll give us a chance to chit chat.
Okay, I'm gonna open them up.
Thank you.
Eric, and right now I'm still seeing view only.
I just put a second link in there after I changed it to anyone. So maybe give it one more.
Yep, that makes sense to me.
All right, so I want to thank you guys for being here, for coming and sharing and reaching out to ELAC, and then we'll follow up with the CE team on next steps. So thank you, Matt. Thank you, Jason. And Enrica, I'm turning this over to you.
Thank you, Lois, and thank you, Matt, and thank you, Jason, again. I'm here to introduce Karma Hugo and Marlene White, and they are both here to provide an update for us, as well as to get some feedback on the new learning management system for early learning and childcare providers. Oh, I see Marlene. I don't. And I'm assuming Karma's here. I just don't see see her picture yet.
I'm here too. Good afternoon, ELAC members and members of the Parent Advisory Group. I'm Karma Hugo. I am the Learning Management Coordinator at DCYF, and I am joined by Marlene White, who is the Workforce Development and Public Relations Manager. We are happy to be here again to collect some more input for the implementation of DCYF's new training site, which will be launching later this year. So I'm going to turn things over to Marlene, and I have some slides I'm going to go ahead and share, if I should. My sharing slides, or was somebody else going to do that? All right, I'll go ahead and put those up. All right, hopefully you're seeing those slides.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got them.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us back. Oh, Karma, I think you're showing your computer.
Sorry about that. Let me try one more time.
Yeah, there we go.
There you go.
Now we see the PowerPoint.
Okay, there we go.
Yes, so we are back. When were we here last time? A couple months ago, and we provided an update on DCYF's training site. So thank you for having us back. We really heard you at the last meeting, and we wanted to come back because our team is committed to including provider voice in our efforts as we continue to, roll out this work. And we realized that we need to do a better job at communicating the stages of this work. There are a lot of moving parts, and we're just at the beginning stages of this work. So we're really here to work alongside DCYF's committee alongside with the public to really get this ball rolling. And, you know, we're here for the same purpose. We are both here to support the workforce, and this system is going to support a very diverse workforce. In one of our presentations, we provided some data on what we've heard on our current LMS system. It is hard to navigate because right now providers have to go to multiple sites to just complete a task related to training. And this system, you know, is going to touch many people, and our workforce is really diverse. As you know, we have like our top 3 languages in early learning are English, Spanish, and Somali. And that doesn't mean that, you know, providers are bilingual. They may be monolingual. And we also have volunteers in classrooms that are young as 14 years old. And we also this system will also be touching family, friend, and neighbor providers who are very diverse in itself. You know, I actually like Googled grandma, like a photo of a grandma, because I've talked to FFN providers, and, you know, they are so diverse. It could be a grandparent taking care of their grandchild, and they have requirements to meet around training. And who knows what their technology use is like. And now you add a language barrier to that. So, you know, we really want a system that's really going to work for our diverse workforce. And the long term is to ensure that training is accessible and useful and meaningful to all who are taking training on this site. And just, I want to touch on how diverse our workforce is, because this site will be used by tribal members, non-English speakers, programs like ECAP, ESIC, coaches, mental health consultants, really anyone who is going to be using it as part of their professional growth. So the better system that we have available to our diverse workforce, the better they're able to engage and learn. So timeline, okay, this is, we just did, Karma and I just provided a live webinar just last month in January. And when I got to the timeline, you know, during our webinars, we get a lot of support roles and childcare providers who join. They just want to learn about what our team is doing. And I knew they were going to ask about timeline, timeframes, when is this coming, what month? And I was very honest and said, we are just starting this work. We are in the early stages of implementation, and we're here to tell you it is coming, and that's about it. So I asked the providers, do you guys have questions for me? And they're like, no, we get it. You don't know. And I'm like, yes, there's a lot of moving parts. And internally, we're working on reviewing things like policy, processes. We're working to beef up our communications and engagement planning. And when I provided more input on that, they were like, oh no, we get it. But yeah, so this is to say we are at the beginning stages of this work. We've only communicated that this is coming, and we're going to continue raising awareness that the new system is coming this year, and continue gathering feedback on the site and keeping all of our audiences informed of this work through our engagement and outreach efforts. And that's actually why we're back here today, to beef up our engagement efforts. So yeah, Karma, do you want to go to the next slide? I think that's yours.
Thanks, Marlene. We would love to hear from you and help us really flesh out the engagement plan. So if you can tolerate another Jamboard activity this afternoon, we would really like to ask you to break up in small groups of 3 or 4. And I'd like to just review the Jamboard that we've prepared and the kinds of feedback that we're looking for today. So I'm going to stop my share for a second, and I'm going to pull open the Jamboard so that we can review it together.
Carmen, can you drop that link in the chat?
I sure will. Yeah, let me do
That would be fantastic. Thank you. Oh, never mind.
I just
You're so fast, Marlene. Good work.
not I wish I could be that fast. Okay, so now I'm ready. I'm going to share my screen so that we can take a peek at these questions together. All right, so we have a total of 5 slides. There's an extra one here with some blank area for you to post other things. But the first thing we were hoping folks would think about is your own experience searching for and finding trainings, engaging in online training, maybe monitoring your own or a staff person's training progress, and or supporting staff members with training. So you would add some stickies about sort of your own preferences and experiences and what you would like to see in a training site. We'd like to capture those here. Someone just slapped a test on there. This looks like it's working. That's great. We want to know more about who we should be speaking to. If you have thoughts about organizations that we can connect to, some of those key players, key stakeholders that we need to make sure that we are engaging with. You can see that there are some sticky notes that were put here previously from provider supports when we met with them. So there's some comments already here. The next slide where we're asking for some input is, when are large events happening, conferences, upcoming important dates or events that we could be providing information about the new training site at? The next slide is asking where are there specific areas in Washington where we need to be paying closer attention? Things like internet deserts or language communities or other ideas you have about specific populations or areas of Washington that might need some specific attention. And then how do people want to connect? What sorts of means or formats would be most useful in thinking about the what and the who? And finally, the last slide is blank. And that is just for anything that you might want to add that we did not include. And why was I not sharing my screen? Sharing that screen? I'm so sorry. Good grief.
It's okay. I got it on there at the last minute.
You got it. All right. Thank you for problem solving, Eric. All right. So our thought is that if you could maybe work through the slides in order, add some comments as you have some input for us. We were thinking about 10 minutes in breakouts. Does anybody have any questions? All right, well, let's launch into breakouts. All right, well, welcome back. Thank you so much for taking some time to review the questions and add some input where you had it. We would like to make this Jamboard available for a couple of weeks. So Eric and company will be sending it out again along with the other Jamboard and give you a sense of how long you can contribute to that. So we appreciate any additional feedback or thoughts you have that you would like to add. We welcome those. I'm going to drop in to the chat the web address where we are keeping updates for all things related to the new training site. And then I will also be dropping my email and Marlene's email into the chat. So we also welcome if you want to reach out to us. I don't know, Lois or Enrica, do we have time for questions or where are we at in the agenda?
I think we are, I'm just looking here. I think we might have like 4 minutes for questions.
Okay, well, we can probably answer 1 or 2 in that time.
Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any questions?
I may be the only one who's a little bit confused, but can you talk about how this work connects with the merit? Can you talk a little bit about how those two things are going to hinge together?
Sure. Currently folks who are looking for training will go into Merit and search for available training. In the case that the training that they're finding is offered online through DCYF, they'll go into a separate training portal to access that training. These pieces will come together. So folks will be going to the new training site. They'll be searching for training, or training orgs and trainers will be posting their trainings up right directly in the new training site. And then folks who are taking online training will be taking it there as well. So all of those training pieces will be united together in the one site.
And then my question, Marlene and Karma, is it okay if we share this out to our networks? And if so, when do you want the feedback to you by, so we can also give them a deadline or timeline?
Yeah, thank you for offering that, Lois. I say absolutely, please share it. I'm just looking to you, Marlene, to think about how long we can keep that open for them.
I how long do you need? I mean, this is a ever like I said, like an ever evolving plan. We recently created a flyer about this work, and then we were able to sit at a conference and provide information about this work. So this is ongoing. We also have 2 recorded webinars, and they're around 10 minutes each, about this new site, what it means, and just a general broad update in both English and Spanish. And if that's something you want to share in case you want to provide that background, that would be great. In the webinar, we do say, hey, if you have, feedback for us or questions, reach out to us, and our contact info is on there too. So yeah, I don't want to give you like a limit because this is ongoing, but is a month too long? Is it too much?
No, I don't think so. Enrica?
I don't think so. And it also gives opportunity for regional advisors to get it to their coalitions as well.
Right. Thank you for suggesting that.
Yeah. All right, I think there are 9 of us left. I was just looking. But the good thing, thank you for everyone who has hung in through the end of the day. I want to thank Karma and Marlene for coming back and sharing that with the group and allowing us time to reach out to our networks to receive feedback. And then I know the CE team will share it broadly as well. And so I want to thank you for that. In the chat, I see they put up the Menti for today. I know we had a number of folks leave. I don't know if it'd be worth it to share it out with those that we know that were here, CE team, and ask them to weigh in. I think having that feedback is always good. But for those who are here, if you would, click on that. And then we'll also, after this, we're going to have a quick word cloud to share one or more words, describe how you feel walking away at the end of today's meeting. And the caveat is that exhausted is off the list, that exhausted is off the table. They have to find another creative way to use that word. And then Jessica, if you could repost the link, I see that was a request in the chat. All right. Well, thank you for that feedback.